Is it working? Is it working? Let's see. Category entertainment. Delay ads during blah blah blah. Botrix has correctly joined the channel. Thank you, Botrix. Mm-hmm. Let us see what we have here. Gonna give everybody just a moment. Actually, I gotta double check and make sure the sound is correct. Hold on a second. One concurrent viewer. I hope that's not the bot. Otherwise, I'll feel really bad. Hello to whoever is that one person. How's it going? Testing, testing, 1, 2, 3. Testing, testing, 1, 2, 3. Okay, the sound works. We're golden. We're golden. All right. Well, don't mind me. I gotta change this thumbnail. That's right. I hate how you have to actively go to the website and change the thumbnail first. I hate how you have to do it after you start the stream. That's kind of weird to me personally. Sorry, give me a second. I spontaneously forgot how to use a computer. Content. Live. What? Shit, hold on. I gotta change the name too? Hold on a second. Crap. I got so many tabs open. Mm-hmm. Shit. Crap. Give me 2 more seconds. Captures. Nah, I give up. Oh well. We're just having the same thumbnail. It'll be fine. Well, hello to the 2 people that are here. How's it going? This is Isaiah, and welcome back to Magic System Monday. Don't mind the manga panels on screen. This is just a placeholder. I didn't know what to put up in front of it, so this is just what we have for now. Oh yeah, that reminds me. I actually learned something very interesting before I got on today. I was scrolling on Reddit and I couldn't help but notice someone actually was talking about Gege, you know, the guy who wrote JJK. And as it turns out, he's actually slightly colorblind. Hmm, interesting. I'm gonna give a couple more minutes for some more people to get in, and then we can get started. I guess. Get started with what? I don't know. I haven't decided. So for those who are interested, I'm actually still working on. I'm still working on the next video. It was gonna be about Datara. It was gonna be a kit analysis video. Unfortunately, I did make it quite a bit longer than I expected. I managed to get the audio down to about 45 minutes. But having said that, I might be able to trim a few more minutes off of it. But other than that, it's gonna take a little while to edit. Oh yeah. All right. So I did actually mention this last stream, but I don't plan on making a JJK video for at least a little while. The reason for that is because JJK is kind of a hot mess. I like to give the benefit of the doubt, and I want to cover everything as fairly as possible, even when I'm criticizing it. But um, at least in my experience, reading, not only watching the anime, but reading through JJK's writing is absolutely horrendous. The character writing is terrible. The the choreography is terrible. The magic system is terrible, and it's just a really painful experience for me to have to cover. So probably what I'm gonna do is, instead of making a full blown magic system review, I'm gonna do it piece by piece. I'm probably gonna make videos on individual pieces or complaints that I have, as opposed to making it about one whole, as opposed to like covering the entire thing in one video, because that would easily be like a 2 hour video, and quite frankly, I just don't want that. Hopefully that answers your question. Such is the nature of current shonen, and most shonen I've watched in the last 30 years, honestly. Yeah, man, I hate to say it. Shonen has. I don't want to pretend. What's the word? My words aren't as precise as I want them to be today. But, what was I going to say? I don't know if shonen has ever really been in a good place for as long as I've been alive. Mind you, I am only like 25 years old, but in my experience, the writing has been kind of hazy at times. Yeah, I think it's getting worse, honestly. It sounds crazy. I mean, I know I have my criticisms of, for example, of Naruto, and I know some people have debate on whether or not they think Bleach is still relevant. I'm not going to get into that right now, because there's an argument to be had either way. But quite frankly, I feel like the shonen, it's getting better in some ways and it's getting worse in others. Like a lot of the more modern shonen that I've seen are going quicker. They're moving a lot quicker, right? But I don't think they develop their characters anywhere near as well as I think they should. Now, you can argue that to an extent for some of the previous anime, right? The previous shonen. But the truth is, at least they have time to develop, even if they don't use that time efficiently. I feel like the new age shonen, they kind of learned the wrong lesson. The lesson isn't not to take a long time. It's to use that time the best that you can. Unless you're gay, you can just, I don't want any more JJK. I wouldn't prefer it if JJK was any longer than it is. 271 chapters is enough, honestly. It's probably too much. I'm not sure how that guy got published. I'll be completely frank with you. But yeah, I just had a few panels open because at this point, I think I read some of Naruto at least almost every day. This is not how I saw my life going. I don't know. I didn't think Naruto was that important to me that I'd have to read some of it every day. But With all these videos that I make, I have to keep on constantly rereading and rewatching things. And that way I can actually, know what I'm talking about. I really don't like talking out of my neck is the problem. I hate when people talk out of their neck. I like to cover all my bases to make sure I'm being as fair as possible. But since I've already done that for today, might as well scroll the same. Yeah, I agree with that. I don't know. What are we doing today? I'm praying that I can get like 3 more people in here. Because last time I was able to keep the stream going just by answering questions. Don't know if I'm going to make it through that way this time. I might have to come up with something else. What say you? We might have to. You can tell that I'm new at streaming. I don't do this very often. This is my, what? Technically, this is my third stream. To me, it feels like my second stream. I streamed, I think, the night before last. I'm streaming tonight, and I think the last stream that I did before that was maybe about a year ago. I wasn't exactly satisfied with that stream. It went well, all things considered, especially for my first time, but you know how it is. But anyway, I'm not sure if you were in here when I was talking about that data video I was making. I may have made it a little bit longer than I was expecting, so it's gonna take me a little bit longer to edit than I prefer. Unfortunately, it is currently looking like it's gonna be about 37 to 45 minutes. So, yeah, there's that. Sorry it's taken so long. I would have had it out by now, at least preferably. But anyway. Oh my gosh, the latency is terrible. Wow. Can I get that fixed from here? I don't think I can. Ugh. Oh well. But anyway. So Xavier, how you doing? Not gonna lie, man. I'll watch a 50-minute video as long as it's good, and yours usually are. Yeah, I appreciate that. I really do. I appreciate that comment. I do try to make my videos as good as possible. My videos, the editing isn't the best. I consider my editing to be relatively basic. I'm content with that for now. Because if I put a lot of effort into editing it, it would just take even longer. Now, having said that, I do plan on hiring an editor eventually, uh, when the math is actually there. I don't think my videos make enough to justify it just yet. Do you watch Rick and Morty? I watch a little bit of Rick and Morty. I haven't technically watched much of it recently. Um, this is gonna make me sound like a real Gen Zer, but I'm gonna say it anyway. Most of my experience with Rick and Morty these days comes from the YouTube shorts. Because I'll be scrolling every now and again and a bunch of it will pop up, but I'll never get a whole episode. I'll never understand what's going on. It'll usually just be some random nonsense. Now, I did watch the first 3 seasons, 2 or 3 seasons when I was in high school. Um, I have some peripheral knowledge of some of the story after that point, but I don't know for sure is what I'm saying. I'm not super well versed in Rick and Morty lore. Back when I was in high school, when they first started getting popular, it had a very lukewarm. It was like a hit or miss. It had a very hit or miss. What is the word? Where did my words go today? It had a very hit or miss reputation, because to some people it was really good. People liked it a whole bunch, but then to other people it was the thing that people who I this is not me saying it. This is just what people were saying at the time. They thought of it as something that people who thought they were smart watched. So yeah, I liked some of it. I liked some of Rick and Morty. But the truth be told, it was hit or miss for me as well. There were some episodes I liked. The first episode was really fucking funny. I'm not gonna lie, that shit was very goofy. Um, as it kind of consolidated on it, not consolidated, as it kind of like solidified its themes a lot. I think there was a lot of potential. I just didn't care about every single episode like that. There were some that I think were really popular, like the whole Pickle Rick thing. I liked it in essence. I think one of my problems is there's a lot of semi body horror in Rick and Morty. I've never really been a fan of body horror. I don't think I've been a fan of horror in general. Well, that's not exactly true. I used to consider myself a diet horror writer because if I'm to put it in layman's terms, when I was younger, I had a lot of psychosis. And so that would kind of affect the way that I wrote. It would affect the way I thought about a lot of things. And I realized there was a lot of potential for like straight up horror elements in my writing. But I just never really like drove into it because I wasn't exactly fond of horror. I got burned out on American adult animation after season 3 of Family Guy. Any series you've been interested in lately? Well, to tell you what I tell everybody else, as of recent, I have not been I've not been reading or watching anything new. Well, no, there's a few small exceptions, but for the most part, I'm just rewatching things and taking notes. You'd be surprised how much time I spend in a day taking notes. As far as American animation, what do I like? I'd say Adventure Time, but that's too easy. Adventure Time ended years ago. I still haven't actually finished Adventure Time. There are so many episodes. What are they? All of a sudden, I'm drawing a blank. BoJack Horseman. I meant to watch BoJack Horseman ages ago. I never got around to it. American Dad. I think the last time I watched American Dad was in middle school. I wish I watched more Futurama. Futurama, I always liked it. I just never got around to watching it. Back when I was younger, we didn't have a lot of access to cable. Um, Having said that, I would say I like Futurama more than I've liked like Family Guy. And yeah, yeah. Sorry, my words aren't drawing as quickly as I would prefer today. But yeah, I like Futurama. I wish I watched more in the past. That's one of those things I just like. My list of things I'm supposed to watch is so long that I'll forget things are on it. Like I forgot that Futurama existed for a while. I tell you what though, Gumball. I heard that they brought Gumball back. That's pretty interesting. I'll have to watch that in a little while. Like I don't really watch cartoons that often. Gumball consistently surprised me with how interesting it was. Adventure Time is actually my favorite Cartoon Network show. You know what? Let me think for a second. Cartoon Network shows. I might have to agree with you on that, but then again, there's some certified hood classics on Cartoon Network. Man, you had that. You had Gumball, regular show. Um, I got burned out on regular shows, so I'm not going to talk about that one. I mentioned it a little bit last stream, I think, but there was, man, what was it? Ben 10. When I say Ben 10, I mean the first series. There was Ultimate Alien, which was really good when it was it Ultimate Alien? Or was it Alien Force? It was UAF or whatever they call it. It was Ultimate Alien and Alien Force combined. When it was good, it was really good. But there were a lot of episodes the writers were just fucking floundering. So when it hit, it hit. But it didn't always hit like that. You know what I'm saying? I feel like as much as I like Ben 10, I feel like its boons, it's the good things about it, the pros are greatly exaggerated. That's definitely a great one. I was blessed to watch Adventure Time while I was young all the way through. Futurama was one of my first shows I remember watching. Hmm. Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. What were you about to say, Isaiah? Sorry, give me a second to grab my words. Um, I like Adventure Time a lot. It's actually kind of interesting because there are so many episodes that you have to sort them out by which episode is which. Like there are some episodes that are like genuine like main story episodes. There are episodes that come highly recommended because even if they don't matter going forward, they're very interesting. I usually like the episodes in that category the most. And then there are some episodes that I don't think Adventure Time necessarily has filler, but there are some that are of such low quality, and there are a lot of them, of such low quality that people effectively consider them to be filler. But yeah, I've liked that. I like that in between where those one-off episodes. I like that. I like that like the ones that investigate either the fantasy of the world itself, not necessarily like the history and the main story, or the ones that just delve deep into like a character's personality and their day-to-day experiences. I really like those. Like for example, that episode with y'all remember that episode where Jake was pretending to be a brick? For some reason, that episode is surprisingly popular. I like it too. Yeah, especially that story about Egress and the train. Yeah, Egress, that's the one I was thinking about. I would say the train, the one with the train, though, is probably my top 10 or 15 episodes for sure. I remember watching that one when I was a kid. That one had a strong impact on the way I thought about Adventure Time as a whole. Like that's like a very like formative memory for me when it comes to Adventure Time. That shit was metal as hell. I love that. I love that episode where he was just going, literally walks up on a train that's just going nowhere, gets in the train, and it's like an RPG, like loot adventure. I like that. Now, Hall of Egress was kind of interesting because I didn't exactly understand what it was about when I was watching it. If you were to ask me to explain it, I still wouldn't know. I guess it wasn't about anything serious, but it was very interesting. It was a very interesting dynamic because it was kind of like a Zelda puzzle, except more annoying. You know, Hall of Egress is my favorite Adventure Time episode. I classify it as an episode that uses mystical magic or magic outside of conventional logic. Yeah, you're right about that. So I guess you would say it's a very excellent use of soft magic. I guess that's what you're saying. I agree with that. I agree with that. Not all magic has to be the type where you explain the logic and use that to solve problems. Yeah, sometimes it's literally the opposite. Sometimes the benefit is you don't know what the hell's going on. Um, if I'm not mistaken, I wish I had it on file somewhere. The writer of Full Metal Alchemist, she, by the way, it was a she. Uh, in one of her quotes talking about how she made the series, one of the core things she wanted to one of the core themes was that she wanted to write a story where people didn't understand what the hell was going on. It was that confusion or that surprise when crazy shit happens that was a very important part of the writing process to her. So yeah. In fact, while we're on that subject, let me be the first person to say that I think that I hate the fact that I have to say this, especially in big 2025. I think that soft magic is actually kind of underrated. Now, as the guy, I can whip up some real complicated stuff myself, but I don't think everything has to be hard magic. I feel like people have gotten too obsessed with the idea of hard magic, like they're constantly trying to prove to themselves that things make sense, and they judge people if every single piece of information isn't like solidified and used in like this really hard way, this concrete way. Speaking of soft magic, I've liked watching your writing card videos a lot. Wouldn't hate those. FMA was one of my favorite stories, but has been replaced by other things as of recent. I'm glad somebody likes the writing card videos. For those of you who don't know, my writing card videos, I actually, hold on a second. I can look myself up now. I'm able to do that because I'm on the web. By the way, I used to have a podcast. A fair warning to anybody who wants to watch this, I haven't updated this in literal years. It's since 2023. That was the Naruto video. So really, I haven't done it since like almost 2022. I don't recommend watching these anymore. They're dusty. They're very dusty. They're very out of date. Um, but anyway, for those of y'all who don't know, the writing card videos are back before I even had the podcast. I had this thing called the writing cards, where they were criticisms that I had to make so often that I might as well just turn them into a playing card. Like, you like play a Yu-Gi-Oh card or like a Pokemon card, you slap it down. It's like if I felt like I had to utilize those criticisms or arguments so consistently that there was no reason for me not to set them apart as like a card or like a deck of cards. So there are currently around 50 writing cards. When I started making the writing card videos, there were around 30 something. I do believe some of them need heavy rework, but I would say I have about 20, 25 good ones. It's just a matter of when I'll make the videos on those. So yeah, I'm glad somebody likes it. Man, I tell you what, I'm gonna have to stop making Naruto videos after this. I mean, I do like making Naruto videos sometimes. My next video is a Naruto video, but like I don't know if I can keep making these Naruto videos. Something about them. They just like don't I like I said I like them. I feel like there's more to talk about than just Naruto. I definitely have more things in the tank to discuss, especially when it comes to the soft magic systems. That reminds me, I meant to make a video on, I still have the notes for it, a video on non-combat magic systems. That's one thing that people I think forget about far too easily. Not only when it comes to soft magic, but also the fact that not all magic systems have to be referential to combat. And so I'll definitely have to talk about that at some later point. I probably should have restarted my computer before I started this stream. That latency is horrendous. It's despicable. It's disgusting. Do you think that Naruto's magic system is the one with the most potential on all anime, or at least the ones you've watched slash read? Naruto is such an interesting hot mess. It can absorb your attention. Magic systems in general nowadays are too hyper focused on personalization. Well, let me think about that. Listen. No, I'm gonna say it as a person who cooks Naruto all the time. Naruto is special. There's something special about Naruto. All right, more than I could possibly explain. The base system is actually very heat. Now, if you pay attention, even when the writer uses the concept of fusion or yin and yang in multiple separate locations in the magic system. I'm not just talking about the concept of yin and yang release, those two, and yin yang release. I'm not just talking about those. Those are one way. Then you have the whole physical and spiritual thing, the energies that you put together to make the magic. I'd say yes, I do think off the top of my head at least, it is one of the shonen anime of all time. It has some of the most potential out of any shonen I've ever watched ever, right? Don't get me wrong, there are plenty of good magic systems in shonen to be had if you're paying attention. I think this is the one with the most potential. Not just in terms of the amount of powers that people have, but the interesting dynamics between those powers. On both the core basis, which is the way the powers work with the chakra system, you have the ability to enhance yourself, your speed, your durability, basic stuff like that. Then you have genjutsu with illusions, enhancing your body to do taijutsu, and that's before we get to like the actual genuine jutsu, right? You see what I'm saying? Because then you have yin based jutsu, yang based jutsu. I mentioned that the writer doesn't use it very well, but that's besides the point. Then you can mix things with elements, right? And then you can mix things together. You see what I'm saying? Yeah, it has so much potential. And then the Kekkei Genkais and stuff, the special lens, like Datara, like you could be minding your own business and you have characters that make sense, right? Like okay, Kakashi or something, like okay, you can see where all his powers come from. It makes sense, right? And then you have random characters like Kisame. You're like, what the hell is that? And the beautiful thing about it, I there's so much like blatant, like full blown fantasy in Naruto that I feel like like for example the animals. There's so many just like live animals that exist, and it's a normal thing. It never feels weird. You know what I'm saying? That's one thing I like about Naruto the most. It's not afraid to just be its own thing. And don't get me wrong, I feel like it could the mechanics could be more utilized, but the fantasy itself is there. I definitely like it more than a lot of others. Like for example, and that's another thing. I like the fact that One Piece, the writer has given himself the opportunity to like do his own thing, right? And that's always going to be an inherently valuable thing because that's the soul of a writer. But I do like the logic of Naruto more. I just do. You know what I'm saying? I do. Uh, that sounds crazy coming from the guy who spent 70 minutes criticizing it, but that's just my opinion. That's how I feel about it. I really like the techno babble that's used in Predator when it isn't about the Predator weapon tech. Hmm. I have not watched a Predator movie since I was in middle school. So, unfortunately, I can't speak on that. I've seen little clips of it. I've seen little pieces of lore. I think the world building in Predator actually has a lot of potential. It's pretty interesting. I just don't know that much about it. You know what I'm saying? Crap, what was I talking about? Now, as for okay. Now, if I had to just never talk about Naruto ever again, which shonen can I think of off the top of my head that has the most potential with its magic system? This is the part where many people would jump up and shout Hunter x Hunter. As I mentioned last time, I haven't watched it yet. I'm scared to watch it because I'm so methodical in my judgment of things. I'm so serious about it. I'm so meticulous about it that I will be able to determine for certain whether the magic system is good or not. And I'm kind of worried. It might actually be just as good as people say it is, and it might not be. I don't know. I'm kind of scared to find out. The second movie has him use blue juice and drywall to patch a wound, implying that half the medicine in the lit needs to be scavenged. Okay. I've kept up to date on Predator, if only because I like that character in Mortal Kombat X. Ah, yeah, yeah, you're right. Man, I haven't played a Mortal Kombat game in so long, but I used to love that. How they had all those cameo characters and stuff. I remember they had Kratos. Man, they had Kratos, they had Predator. Who else did they have? Man. Let me stop talking about fighting games. I'm actually not good at them, so I don't think I have the I don't think I'm gonna be crap, Isaiah, where are your words? I'm not super good at fighting games, so I probably shouldn't speak on them too much. Hot take. Immortality is not a real power, but the consequences of one's powers. And the power of flying is not real. It's just telekinesis for your own body. Well, this is actually a very interesting take. Let me think about that for a second. Also, is Lewin in the chat? I'm just trying to see if you're here. If not, it's fine. I was just expecting him to show up. I wonder if he's actually here. Um, Now, for your take on immortality and flying, I circumstantially agree with you. And here's why. There's nothing stopping you from actually having immortality or flight as a power, but the way I like to think about things, the devil's in the details. The question is, what exactly is it? What is the core mechanic? Like for example, ninjutsu isn't a power. Ninjutsu is an ability. A power is the underlying force that you have, right? That's the logic I use. The power is the underlying force that you have that fuels abilities, which is things you can do. People often get them mixed up because they directly correlate to each other, but they aren't necessarily exactly the same thing. So, in that regard, I guess I agree with you on that. Immortality, actually, yeah, I completely agree with you. My bad. Yeah, I'm tweaking. Yeah, you're actually spitting. Honestly. Yeah, I would largely agree with you on that. Especially with flight, I always thought I noticed this when the first season of Invincible came out. I was looking at the logic of the way Omni Man explained the way the flight works, about how you can generate force in any direction and you can push off of yourself. You don't need to, and I was like, that's really interesting. Because with some works of fiction, it could literally be like a field of telekinesis, like you're just willing yourself to move, right? Other times you literally propel yourself. It seems like the way the flight works in Invincible is like an odd mix in the middle. I like that a lot. It could be that the inherent force that guides their flight is also used in their other abilities. The writer, at least in the animation, the writer just doesn't talk about it. Depends on the immortality. If it's a true godly immortality, then you're not wrong. But if it's just hyper regeneration, then yes. Yeah, you have a point on that. It depends on exactly how the system works. Like for example, one of the works of fiction that I write in prominently. I'm not going to talk about it too much. I don't like talking too much about my own writing, for obvious reasons. For starters, it just might bore some people, and second, I don't want to seem egotistical, so I don't. I'm going to make this quick. But what was I about to say? For example, in one of the systems that I write in prominently, one of the most important features is the concept of order. It is that the source of the magic itself imposes order on things. And as a result of having its own order that it forces things to operate in, it's implied that immortality is a side effect of that. That the order that keeps your body stable and keeps your body in working order, it keeps it functioning properly, is just so strong that that's what fuels not only your regeneration but your inability to age. So yeah, depending on the context, it is just a side effect. Ugh. My bad. My apologies. Um, I think that true godly immortality is either hyper regeneration or hyper durability, or instant reincarnation, or something or sorts, or all mixed up together like Sun Wukong. Yeah, that reminds me. Sun Wukong. That reminds me. This man has like a trillion forms of immortality. That was something that actually that I found very interesting when I was younger. The idea that the idea that you can have multiple quote unquote layers of immortality. I was so confused. I was like, what does that even mean? He's got the immortality pills, right? Then he practices the Tao that makes him functionally immortal, right? Then he had some more stuff. He got his name removed from the Book of Death so he can't die. I was like, bro, how many do you need? Like, calm down. But yeah, I guess it does make sense that different types of immortality can have their own mechanics. That's kind of interesting. True godly refers to Cthulhu mythos. I'm gonna go ahead and say it. If this makes me sound like a fraud, I'm gonna say it. I am not very well versed in the whole Cthulhu mythos at all, and I'm also not interested. I know people love it. People love it. They love it, and they're free to love it. I respect that. I just don't care. I'm pretty sure there's some wonderful stuff in there. It's just never been something that interested me. To be fair, though, I think the problem is not necessarily the writing itself. I think the way people explain it is the part that bores me. It could just be that people are framing it wrong when they discuss it with me. I don't know that for sure, though, so I'm gonna leave it alone. Also, if you want to know a fun fact, if you want to discover a fun fact on your own, um, whatever the guy his name was that wrote that, ask Google what his cat's name was. This is not a political stunt here. I just think it's really funny because someone mentioned that to me on Discord a few years back, and I wasn't paying attention, and I just blurted something out. I just types out some random nonsense, and he was like, "Yes, that's actually it." And I was like, "Oh wow, that's an interesting concept. Reminds me of Bleach's spiritual pressure, though much of that is kind of muddy. Sun Wukong's immortality could be an entire story on its own, though. Yeah, you're right. It could. It could be so much of its own story that it Sun Wukong's immortality could be so much of its own story that it takes up such a long part of Journey to the West that there are a lot of people that don't know that Journey to the West is not about him. Like imagine like the prologue to your book is like watch this. Watch us speed run the life of this whole other character, this side character. Yeah, this guy. Yeah, we're gonna make the first 5 chapters of a 20 chapter story about him. There could be games and there could be games and games about Sun Wukong like God of War sagas. Yeah, I agree with that. Ah, he just reminded me. I regret not playing those most recent God of War games. I played the first one, and I've watched people play the second and third games. I don't know anything about God of War Ascension. Matter of fact, I probably still have God of War somewhere, God of War 1 in the house somewhere, now that I think about it. I don't know where I put it though. But yeah, I used to love God of War 1. I loved it. I love it. I love God of War. God of War is great. It's the idea that the flesh is a non factor. They don't have spirits, so even if you can inflict spiritual damage, it doesn't do anything. And they don't exist on the spectrum of life and death. They function more as living concepts, but with a caveat you can't erase their concept. That's fantastic. I love when characters go more into the conceptual realms. Alright, I would argue that I agree with that up to a point. You do have to be careful with it because there does reach a point where it can just be complete nonsense. But that goes for anything. I do like delving into like the more primal aspects or concepts in the universe myself in my own writing. But yeah, you have to be careful though, because there reaches a point where you can kind of like lose your base in reality. How long has this stream been going for? It hasn't even been that long. Maybe 45 minutes. But yeah, didn't they say they were coming out with another God of War game? What was that game called? Weren't they like going to Egypt or something like that? I can't remember. Yeah, the insignificance of human existence in Lovecraftian works makes that nonsense work as a leverage to push down on human understanding further. Interesting. That was the original plan of God of War. Yeah, it's Egypt. Man, bro, let me tell you something. When I was younger, I remember vividly in 6th grade, I used to love. But let me erase that part. I don't know what that. That's not the type of magic I'm looking for. Hold on, let me. I used to love the concept of Egypt when I was young. When I was younger, right? But the more I learned about it, the more it creeped me. It really creeped me out. This stuff is. Some of the wall art, man, is so creepy. It really just really gets under my skin. But it's still all pretty interesting though. Like for example, I had a I had a general ed history course in college where they were talking about their thought process on spirituality. And what I learned is that in Egyptian lore, apparently there's different parts of the soul that all do different things, and some of them split up when you die. Like for example, there's the part that actually goes to the afterlife to do the trial to go meet Ra or whatever. And then there's the part that's more like your personality or your substance, and that part stays behind and can interact with the real world. In the lore at least. Jeddah? It's been so long since I've studied anything about Egypt. I used to like the idea so much, but it's so creepy. I've explored a lot of mythologies, but I don't actually know much about Egyptian myths. Definitely liked the idea of pyramids and mummies when I was younger, but I knew nothing about much of it. Yeah, the trials of Mott where your heart is put on a balance. Yeah, yeah. Man, what I learned was so apparently there's like a book you could buy. How do I explain this? So the reason they have those temples and stuff where you put the mummies in, like my tongue, my apologies, guys. The reason that they have that stuff that you house the bodies in is because apparently that was their means of bringing stuff with them to the afterlife, right? So apparently, like in the afterlife, you need like substance, like you need like food and stuff to survive. That's why you put food in the tomb with them. And the idea that you could just take whatever you brought with you there. They also had these books that priests or whatever would give you with detailed information. It was like a game guide. It was like a game menu, like a game informer where it explains this is the trial. This is how you're supposed to do it. This is how you're gonna get into the. Hold on a second. Lewin, if you can hear me, I'm gonna text you. But yeah, they have a book that you can buy. They have a book that you can buy, and then you can actually leave it in the tomb with the dead body, so that when they come back, so they can go to the afterlife, they can bring that book with them, so they know what to do. That's kind of interesting. That reminds me, I gotta turn off Discord next time I stream. I grew up in an oppressive Christian upbringing, so I get learning creep factor from foreign religious topics. I don't appreciate it. I understand. Oh, it's not the fact that it's not the, how do I explain this? I'm not sure you were here earlier when I was talking about psychosis, but that's why. But yeah, what was I about to say? Because foreign religions are infinitely fascinating. Inside now. Just X that out. I'm getting so many messages all of a sudden. Taraba Ninja. Yo, what's good, gang? How's it going? Welcome to the stream. There's also a lot of interesting things in Christianity, like the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit is one of the most interesting parts of the Bible. It's potentially unknowable and mysterious. Okay, hold on a second. My stream device has to be. There is no way the latency is actually that bad. This has to be. This has to be incorrect. Oh, man. But yeah, Ninja, what's good, man? What's happening? What's happening with you? I trust you're doing well. But yeah, you'll often find that amongst the different cultures of the world, whether you subscribe to them or not, each of them has a lot of things worth being inspired with. There's a lot of crazy stuff in all of them that's very interesting. You know what I'm saying? My book is a religious allegory for forgiveness, using biblically accurate Satan from the book of Job as a mirror for biases. That's pretty interesting. That's pretty neat. That's pretty neat. But yeah, the different cultures provide a lot of different inspiration. Like, for example, going back to the whole Egypt thing, I mentioned earlier that there are different parts of the soul in Egyptian lore, and how part of it goes to the great beyond, and parts of it stay here. Parts of it are meant to come back and eat for substance, and then parts of it can actually go out to the world and interact, almost like it's like the manifestation of a person's substance. And I found that very interesting looking back on it, because in one of the magic systems that I write in prominently now, that's actually a very important mechanic. The way it works spiritually is there's the spirit, which is the core of a person, right? Obviously, there's the physical aspects, and then there is what's referred to as the shadow or the exhaust. It is the essence. So there's spiritual force, and then there's essence. That essence that's put out is a manifestation of not only just a person's experiences, but the existence that they were living at that moment. And that, you get what I'm saying. And that can have a number of different effects in the world. For example, that's what absorbs, and it can come into objects and bring them to life, or it can make phantoms, or that's the thing that causes corpses to get back up into zombies, as an example, if there's a lot of it. And those essences apply to all different types of energies. It could be emotions, right? It could be whatever energy you use for magic, right? It could be the different elements. All of those spiritual forces in the world have that exhaust, and that exhaust is an equally critical facet of the spirituality of that world. I believe that through several translations and the loss of the original Bible collection at the burned down Library of Alexandria, a lot of information that is crucial got lost so that it's only a husk. That's a fair possibility. Now, I've heard a couple of different things regarding the whole fiasco with the Library of Alexandria. I've heard it one of two ways. The first is exactly what it sounds like, that was a horrible thing that happened, and a lot of knowledge was lost. I've also heard people, and I don't know which interpretation to subscribe to because I don't know enough about it myself. I'm not a Greco-Roman guy. I know there's memes about how often men think of the Roman Empire and think of the Greeks, right? I'm just simply not one of those people. I respect their value, right? It's just not I have a lot of things to focus on. I don't just focus on that. But I hear some people saying that the consequence of the Library of Alexandria burning down is greatly exaggerated. I've had people say to me that most of the things in the library were already inscribed somewhere else. They had other copies or something like that, and therefore it's not a big deal that it burned down. Now, obviously, something got lost there that night, right? The question is how much. I don't know which school of thought to subscribe to because I'm just not well versed enough in this information to know for sure. As a Christian myself, I find myself using a lot of the ideas in the Bible to write about deep topics, but that's probably not very unique. A lot of people use religious ideas to frame their themes. There's nothing wrong with that. Like, for example, I myself am inspired by a great many things. If I'm not mistaken, in my very first episode of Magic System Monday, I mentioned that magic systems and writing by extension, that's backwards, my bad. Writing and magic systems by extension are kind of like karate. They're in everything you do. Think of it like one of those cultivation style mangas or manhwas or whatever, where they like absorb energy from different parts of the universe to get stronger. That's how I see it, right? The way I see it, you can find mechanics to inspire you from anywhere. You know what I'm saying? I've looked at the sun, the moon, and the stars, and I've been inspired. I've looked at the floorboards and the cracks within them and been inspired by that. I've seen the ants walking by on the curve in a line and been inspired by that. You can be inspired by anything. Moreover, just being inspired by something, you could all be inspired by the same thing. That doesn't mean you come to the same conclusion. After all, everybody's different. What parts of it inspire you, you know? And then once you figure out all the pieces that inspire you, how do you build them? Because being inspired by something is not what decides whether or not it's unique. The question is, how do you take all the pieces and put them together? You see what I'm saying? Yeah, I think logically that makes the most sense because those books would have been sourced from somewhere and backed up in case of a fire. I hope you're right. I hope you're right. I really do. Given my experience with humanity, it's hit or miss. It could be that they were on their A game and they had common sense and they wrote all that stuff down somewhere else, right? Or they could just be idiots who knew how to read and write. I don't know. It's anybody's guess. I hope it's like you say that they had that stuff written down somewhere, but yeah. Also, it is still probably highly probable that something important got lost in that fire. But I don't know for sure. But yeah, you can be inspired by just about anything, and you can be inspired by any part of it, you know? I tell you one thing that a lot of people are inspired by that for some reason I've never cared for much myself is Greek mythology. Just Greek mythology, I've just never cared for it that much. I respect its value. I do. I honestly do, I promise. I just don't care that much. Like, it's surprising to me that I even like stuff like God of War, because that mythology, I just don't care for. I don't know. Some stuff, like, tickles my fancy, and other things don't. You know what I'm saying? I've created a character and a whole backstory just because I've watched YT shorts about Luna moths. That's interesting. Let's look at that. Ooh, that thing is ugly. I mean, I see what they were going for. It low-key looks like a spaceship right here, honestly. Like, if you catch a spaceship, or no, better yet, it looks like a manta ray. No. There we go. It looks like a manta ray. Without the mouth, obviously. What are some ways to determine how the character cast and what spells exactly they can or can't use? It does look like the ship from Warframe, doesn't it? Hold on a second. Man, I really want to. I'm going to answer your question in just a second to the best of my ability. I really want to play Warframe. I like it, right? Ninjas play free, right? I'm a ninja. I want to play for free. The game is so grindy, though. The world building is kind of interesting, but I don't like that super gritty stuff. You know what I'm saying? I don't like that super gritty stuff. I respect its existence, though, because the world building is actually pretty interesting. The different frames, I like them a whole lot. But I don't know. I just can't play the game. Like, I can grind on my own, right? I got the weights right here, right? The ground is here. Like, I can do my sit up. I can grind on my own. I don't need to play a game. I don't need to play a game to grind. I will be perfectly fine, right? I want to have fun. I want to be free. I want to fly. I want to fly my manta-shaped spaceship. You know what I'm saying? But yeah, maybe I'll get over that one day and actually play it because it looks good. And I have a computer with the specs for it now. The last time I tried to play it, I was like, I was playing it on a Lenovo Yoga. I had like 8 frames a second. It was atrocious. Yeah. Let's see. Dark Sword. My apologies. Dark Souls lore goes crazy. It's just Greek mythology with some elements swapped around and family bonds being different. Interesting. I didn't know that. Man, I want to play Dark Souls one day. I think I played Dark Souls 3, but I didn't even finish it. It's a cool game, but I was too busy to get into it and do the whole trial and error thing. Watch the game beginning to end though. Isn't Elden Ring kind of similar to this? Yeah, I think so. Elden Ring is made by the same people, I think, if I'm not mistaken. Now I heard that they used George R. R. Martin to help them make some of the lore. The way they made that game's lore is actually pretty interesting to me. And I'm still going to answer your question, Ninja. I didn't forget. Don't let me forget. They took George R. R. Martin, right? And he made all this elaborate lore and world building and stuff and this story, right? And they did what I do a lot. Instead of having that be the story for the game, the world building for the game, they progressed it in time. Because sometimes you don't actually have to build the proper world or world building for your setting. You can take other world building that you've already created and just age it and progress it. Because after all, time moves on. People live, people die, they do things, they design things, they develop things. Some things progress, some things regress. Somebody gets assassinated, they get their block knocked off, you know what I'm saying? And then eventually, after 20, 50, 30 years, right? You're going to be left with something that's completely different from what you started with. And sometimes that's the way to make something the most unique. I've never thought about oh, so Elden I've never thought about Elden Ring as a reverse divorce story. That's actually hilarious. One of my coworkers was explaining a little bit about Elden Ring's lore to me, and it's convoluted, interesting, mystical, and sometimes breathtaking. I absolutely agree with that. I really do. I really do. It's a shame I don't play those games, those FromSoft games. Man, they're too tedious for me. I don't know what to say. Yeah, I think the last one I played was Bloodborne. I definitely liked it. It was just really annoying. That stamina bar pissed me off a couple of times. Um, yeah, yeah. I like Elden Ring the most out of the From Software games. I think aesthetically speaking, I like it the most too. The only one I personally would play is Bloodborne because it's just like Monster Hunter for the most part. Monhun. I assume that's Monster Hunter, I don't know for sure. I have also never played Monster Hunter. I remember when I was in college, Monster Hunter World came out and everybody loved it. Everybody loved it. I did not have the specs to play that game at the time. Yeah, Monster Hunter. Excellent. All right, before I forget, I got to answer your question. Where is it? What are some ways to determine how the character can cast and what spells exactly they can or can't use? That's a very broad question. The Golden Roots kind of looks like the magic system I try to build. Yeah, okay, so it is you, Lewin. That makes sense. I figured that was you. For those of you who were in the chat the day before yesterday, wait, was that yet day before yesterday? Sorry, the days kind of blend together when you don't have to clock in. My apologies. Give me a second to reground myself. Yeah. So that is Lewin. That is a very broad question. I think I can answer it partially. It really just depends on the circumstance, after all. Like, for example, how do I explain this? Because this is so broad. This is so broad, especially on short notice. We can do this, though. We can answer this. So think about it, for example, one reason that they could have different spells that they can cast, or the way they cast it is different. They could have actual different sources of power, right? For example, and this is why I like the whole elemental framework so much. I know a lot of people get tired of elemental magic systems. I respect that, right? Because a lot of people don't use them that well. But like I say, you can use anything well if you're willing to put the time and effort into it, right? Think about it if you had it if you were casting spells that were based off different elements. In a system where not only you have different elements, but the core philosophy of those elements is different, naturally you're going to either call upon those elements in different ways, or they're going to be able to be used in different ways. If I'm going to, let me just trim the fat from what I'm saying here. I'm going to use my work as an example because I'm most familiar with my work, right? So in some systems, I do use a type of a mana-esque system, right? But there's no such thing as generic mana. There are different attributes, not necessarily elements, although elements fall in that category. There are different attributes. I might have a chart somewhere if you guys want to see it. There are different attributes of or forces in the universe, each with their own specific qualities, and those define what those attributes are good and bad at doing. For example, fire is very high in the volatility principle. Volatility meaning that it is extremely destructive to anything that it touches. It's going to be very energy efficient when it comes to doing damage to things, right? But it comes at the cost of being more difficult to control. That would be very different from something like, and I use elements as an example because it's easier to understand. That would be very different from something like air. And that system, air is not very volatile, but it's not very dense either, because those two are polar opposites. Dense elements like, for example, earth, they're less flexible, so they're also harder to control. They're not as flexible. They're also heavier. Meaning that they're better at defense, they have more staying power, right? But then you have elements like air, which aren't good at either. It doesn't have the inherent volatility or destructive potential of something like fire, and it wouldn't have the inherent defensive capabilities or staying power as earth. But as a result of that, not having those distinct qualities, it's easier to control for general purposes. So it's not going to be as destructive or as defensive, but it's a great all-arounder. And so in a system like that, it's very easy to make it so that even if they're interacting with the same magic system, they're going to be better or worse at different things. Like fire-type users are going to be better at using offensive spells, right? As an example. And then you get what I'm saying, right? Hopefully I'm answering your question partially. Another thing that you could consider is not just the qualities of the inherent source itself. You could also ask how people connect to that power, because that could probably be a very big indication of what types of spells they cast or how they cast. For example, what was I about to say? Let me think. I guess you could use D&D as an example if you want. Like, for example, in D&D, there are people who have to look at all the rules of magic to manipulate it properly. Those would be wizards, right? And then you have people like warlocks. Warlocks aren't the best at casting spells, right? But they have special abilities that they get from, because they make contracts with other creatures. And those creatures give them some of their abilities. So while a warlock has less spells, they often have more innate features that they can draw upon. Like, perhaps it changes their physiology or something like that. Hopefully I'm answering your question. This is why I like making videos more than I like streaming, because I can really sit down and figure out the answer to a question more effectively than I would be able to on short notice. Yeah, more or less. They pledged to outer. Yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah. They get eldritch magic, more fickle and drawbacks based, but it comes naturally. Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah. Depending on what system you're into, when it comes to how a person taps into their magic, you could also employ different means to do so. Like what we're talking about with the warlocks, it could be that even if that power is not innate to them, there are definitive, concrete effects that they can manifest with that power very naturally to them, right? The same way that a warlock would do with their warlock invocations. Like, for example, a really popular one in the 5th edition game is, what's it called? The Eyes of the Rune Keeper or the Lore Keeper or something like that. That's not something you have to turn on. It's a permanent change. It gives you the ability to read any written language, whether you understand that language or not, right? Tapping into that magic is immediate. It's like it's not something you have to turn on. You don't have to use a process to do it, right? On the other hand, if you were someone like a wizard, that would be different. You have to actually figure out the coding and the inherent logic. You have to brute force the system to figure out how things work, to force it to work for you. You could argue that they have to bend the logic of magic into their submission. I don't know if the writers would portray it that way. On the other hand, there's things like clerics. They use what's called channel divinity. Well, they do have spells or whatever, but they get their magic directly from whatever deity it is that they worship or whatever. And channel divinity is literally them saying, hey, whatever the source of my magic is that they worship or make a deal with or whatever, they're going to directly pull energy from that. And whatever powers that channel divinity has, it directly correlates to whatever that creature does. You see what I'm saying? Like if it does, like if it's like a, what is it? Let me give an example. You ever play Baldur's Gate 3? There's this one character in Baldur's Gate who's a cleric. She worships, what was it? The lady's name is Shar. She's like the Lady of Darkness or something like that. I can't exactly remember. Her channel divinity, it obscures things in darkness. It helps you hide and stuff like that. There are probably some more that I'm forgetting, but I don't exactly remember. It's been so long since I played D&D, I'm not really fond of it anymore. Oh, it's fine. You don't have to worry about holding me hostage. I did this to myself. I have the problem that I make a memory-based magic system, and if it comes as a resource from memory, external problem is that uses social drama will be part of it, like a family reunion. That's stupid, to be honest. I see what you mean. Pretty much holy warlocks. It often strengthens their physical body or weapons. That's one of the reasons I don't like the system in 5th edition anymore. When you really look at the rules of magic for the different classes, almost all of them are just a type of warlock with different mechanics. Clerics, you see what I'm saying? They channel the power of their pack directly, right? And they're just flavored differently with different mechanics. Now, technically, it's not portrayed as them making a deal, right? That's fair, and you can use that in the flavor if you want, but from a zoomed out perspective, doesn't really matter all that much. Because if you're worshiping or following a deity or something like that, they have their own rules anyway that you're supposed to follow. You've already effectively made a deal with them. That's how you got their power in the first place, my guy. You are a warlock with just different mechanics. You see what I'm saying? Paladins are a little bit different, but only because they're half fighters. I mean, yeah, they technically don't follow anyone. They follow their oath. But the question is, okay, all right, so you don't necessarily make a pact with a creature. You make a pact with yourself or a philosophy. You're an ideologue, my guy. I mean, if that's how you want to do it, it's fine. But like, you're a warlock too. You see what I'm saying? You're a warlock too. And then sorcerers, you get the idea. I'm not even gonna go into that. You get what I'm saying. So when you zoom out, most of the magic looks the same. Not so hot take. This thing about a superior species mating with humans and the child is somehow more powerful never made sense. If anything, the child should be weak or completely powerless. Well, it depends on, I'm glad you brought that up. It depends on the exact mechanics, especially if it's not strictly biology based, right? Now, if it's biology based, we have to follow the rules of biology, and we already know those. So in that regard, you would be right. Like if you said, oh, if we assumed that in a given work of fiction that elves were better, right? That elves, I don't subscribe to that logic, obviously, but a lot of writers do that where like there's like elves or an elf-like creature stand-in that is like superior. And maybe they get together with a human, and then you have a half-elf. You're right, that half-elf should be inferior. But if we're going off of some like magic, like some kind of like magical physiology, like for example the rules I use in some of my writing, the spiritual genealogies, they don't exactly work the same. But yeah, the way I do it is, as an example, for because like you can change any mechanic you want in a work of fiction. You can do whatever you want. The way I do it is, at least with the spiritual qualities, each one has a relative level of heritability, and then so much, and then like you could say a size or a bandwidth. Think of every different person having a certain amount of space inside of them for their spiritual genes, right? Um, as long as they have the space for it, they can inherit it. You see what I'm saying? Obviously, heritability with some abilities is limited, right? But the core ones that define a class or race, those have 100% heritability. The problem is, the drawback in this case would be that if whatever amount of space that quality takes, you don't have enough in that person's storage, so to speak, then one of two things happens. One, obviously they don't get it at all, or two, you just can't have a kid. You don't have a kid. So in that regard, the more powerful races that have all these powerful qualities that define the race that have to be passed down, if they can't successfully be passed down, a kid just cannot be conceived. It just doesn't happen. But yeah, fantasy is weird that way. I feel like a lot of writers, they'll come up with mechanics and they don't really think about them or their implications. It does become kind of weird. Bushido code making magic samurai would be pretty based. That's what Devil May Cry also does, not the original, but the ripoff of DMC. The Lord of the Rings has a great answer to that. Half elves are limited to human lifespans unless they reject their humanity and embrace being an elf. Magical bloodline shift. That reminds me, I was reading last year, I was reading one of the Dresden Files books. I only got up to book 4 and I didn't finish it because it pissed me off, but so far it's pretty interesting. There are some characters, there's some races called changelings. And the way it works in that world is that there's people, right? And there are different magical races, like for example, different types of fae. And so if a fae and a human come together, you get a changeling. A changeling is a human with some of the inherent qualities of that fae creature, and they have to choose whether or not they want to stay like a normal person as they are. But they can also make the choice to just give up on their humanity and become a full-blown fae. So that sounds very similar. Where did I leave my water? Hold on a second. But yeah, it sounds very similar to me. That actually might be where he got it from. Now that I think about it, the magic of that blood, JoJo. Man, y'all really gonna punish me for not watching JoJo's yet, huh? I'll watch it eventually. I will. I will. I'll get to it. I really will. Makes sense, but I think that that's part of the training of or magical development. What I don't accept is a literal child already being born with that gift unleashed. Do you know the magic system of JoJo? Uh, I know a little bit of it. I know there's at least two, I think. I don't know that much about either of them. But I definitely need a story that's more firmly grounded in Fey mythology. As far as JoJo goes, I read the first book and I couldn't finish it. It just doesn't interest me as much. Four, kind of. Now, accept not. To respond to that, I guess it just depends on exactly what qualities we're talking about. Like, for example, if we were to say that a race has an inherent ability, I don't have a problem with them having that by default, right? Now, having said that, that having an innate ability that you have a grasp on by default, and then having to train and develop, those two aren't necessarily mutually exclusive. Now, if what you're saying is that you don't want writers to use that as an excuse to not actually write the story, right? Because a lot of times writers will use things, they'll justify them in world, but what they're really doing is making an excuse to not make the story as interesting as it could be, because they're removing facets that would have added stakes to the story and would have given you more investment into the story. So, in that regard, I do agree with you. Yeah, I don't think people should just come out of the womb like having all their problems solved. If that's what you're talking about, yeah, I do believe that they should work and figure stuff out. That's where the interesting story comes in. Now, I will say this. This is something that bothers people a great deal, and I'm gonna get back to the comment section in just a moment. But I will have to say, I, as a writer, do not have an issue with some people just being more talented than other people or just being more special. I I understand that writers have to be careful with that, right? It doesn't bother me in the slightest. Unto itself. It can be used better, it can be used worse. Yeah, too, but when it comes, I'm looking forward to that review because it will be a good one to watch. Oh, you're talking about JoJo's? Eh, I'll have to move it up on my list if you want. Yes, for everyone listening, yes, I will totally. I know I said in that short like 3 years ago that I wasn't gonna do it. All right, I changed my mind. I'm gonna do it. I will watch JoJo's, right? Just a matter of timing, all right? The question now is, how different are the anime and manga? Because I don't want to watch the anime and then somebody go, well, actually, the manga works completely differently. JoJo comes in parts. Parts one and two are more playing their time period straight. Part two starts to break out of that in a major way. So maybe give it a try in part three and come back for part one and two. Okay, so they're not very different. Impressive. All right. Either way I slice it, I'm gonna have to watch and read it. But you get the idea. I just wanted to know in advance because I recently heard, unfortunately, this really troubled me. It made me upset when I found out that, at least from what the person was telling me, that crap, where is it actually? I can find it. Refer to as, they were saying, there it is. He was saying that the mechanics for magic in the manga, for Black Clover, and the anime work differently. At least for anti magic. And that kind of disappointed me because I was so proud of this little snippet of the video. Even though, for those who don't know, this snippet that I talked about for Black Clover was actually part of the Metas video. But I felt like it didn't flow properly, so I removed it. And I was so proud of it, though, that I kept it. I just kept it as a separate video. But yeah, so from what this guy is saying, it actually works a little bit differently, completely differently even. And that kind of just disappointed me because I was so proud of the logic of it. I'm like, they set this up pretty well, at least early on. Only for me to find out, no, Isaiah, it doesn't work that way. They just fixed it in the anime. I'm like, ah, crap. There's a little bit of chronology that's different, but it's nothing major, just pacing and order of events. Okay, that's good, that's good. I think I could have a nice conversation with Taraba Ninja. He seems to understand a lot about the philosophy of magic and magic systems in general. I am so glad you said that. Now, me and Taraba actually met over Discord. Interestingly enough, he's one of the few people. Yes, I'm finna gas this man up. Y'all get ready. Taraba is actually one of the few people that I know who's actually been able to help me build, to help me like actually help me write. He's the only person I've known in a long time who's actually been able to help me progress in my writing. Now, he claims to be new at it. He does. He does indeed claim to be new. I've taught him some stuff. We've discussed things over Discord. I'm helping him with one of his magic systems. We talk every other day about it. Um, but yeah, he actually seems to have a good grasp on not only mechanics in the systems, but the use of those mechanics. He's also very good at compartmentalizing information and organizing it in his head. So this is actually pretty good. There have been times where I thought I was rambling a little bit incohesively, and like he was able to like put it all together in a way that made sense and make actual productive suggestions. This is not a skill that you see in people often. This is actually a big deal to me. So yes, you are correct. You could probably have a very good conversation with him. Maybe next time, if his schedule aligns, we can link up on Discord and we can stream that way. I haven't watched part 6, but if any part of some change, if any part got some changes, it would be that one. No- Notoriously convoluted explanations of already convoluted powers. Ah, man, that's disappointing. I mean, complicated powers can work, but I think a lot of writers lay it on extra thick. They make it too complicated unnecessarily. Like, for example, that's how I feel about Gojo's powers from JJK. I understand all of his powers. I don't have any problem with them at face value. Um, but my problem comes in when the writer, I hate the fact that he does this, and the fans. There are videos that pop up every now and again on YouTube of people going, you don't understand Gojo's powers. It's easy, it's just math. And they put a bunch of bullshit math on screen that may or may not be accurate, but I don't care. You don't need a mathematical theorem to understand this man's powers. You can explain that shit in plain English. It like adding a bunch of numbers to it and a bunch of letters for fucking trigonometry or some shit. That's not necessary. It's overkill. Feng Shui being a power is only a product of there being 100 plus powers before it, Limphao. I'm getting too much credit, haha. Nah, you're good, man. You're good. You're good. You're good. You're good. You have a decent head on your shoulders. You probably know that to be true. You don't have to downplay yourself. After all, that is your main weapon. You should be proud of it and use it. Keep it sharp, my man. But yet, yeah. Search your feelings, ninja. You know it to be true. He's spitting. I think also the I think also that Gojo should be stronger, for example. Hollow Purple should not just be an energy explosion slash destruction ray. It should literally erase space, creating a black void. Oh man. Okay, hold on a second. You might have a point there. We can talk on particulars, but in general I agree with what you're saying. What was I about to say? Um what was I about to say? Isaiah, remember. Yeah, I agree with you on that. I also don't agree with the way what's that blonde lady's power lady whatever her powers are, the Star Rage lady. I don't completely agree with the way her powers work. I find it very strange. Well, at face value there's nothing wrong with her powers, but I find it very strange how Gojo's power is that he can warp space. There's the neutral version of infinity. There's blue, which he can just bend and bundle space however he wants. It allows him to fly, to crush things, la da 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 da, right? How space works, right? And then he has the repulsory effect of red. And then he has purple, which seems to be some kind of disintegration ray blast, right? But I'm supposed to believe that there's a whole separate power that controls gravity specifically. Makes sense at face value, right? But if you've ever been to so much as fifth grade, I'm not talking about normal fifth grade, I'm talking about American fifth grade. I would know because I was there. You would know that gravity is a facet of space bending. You see what I'm saying? So if Gojo can bend space, how the fuck does he not have gravity powers? For all intents and purposes, he should just have the better version of her power. Like her power she should be completely outclassed. No one should care about her ability. Her ability should be chump change. JJK as well as Bleach have had such great ideas for power systems that you can almost forgive the story for going off on the rails until the story grabs the system too. Gravity is a wave. All right, that's fair. Gravity waves are a thing, right? But the thing is that mass bends space, right? And Gojo can bend space. There's nothing stopping him from making waves either. Although you're right, gravity waves are a thing. Alright, bro, if you say so. But yeah, for the way I see it, there's no way he doesn't have these powers. But anyway, what was I about to say? Yeah, fun fact, if you guys were interested, the way JJK is written in season 1 is actually very interesting because you can tell a lot of it is directly referential to the way Infinity works. It's directly referential to Gojo. So the writer made all these cool powers for Gojo, right? But then the base ability for Infinity makes him untouchable. So he had to find a way to make him untouchable, right? But he didn't want it to be too common because that would completely invalidate the ability and that would call his position as strongest into question too early, right? You don't want a way that too easily negates the you don't want to have an ability that too easily negates Infinity that's too common. So what did the writer do? He made domain expansions. And one of the rules of domain expansions, the base rules, is that once you weave that domain into a barrier to make a complete one, you get the sure hit effect, meaning that all of your attacks automatically land. I guess you can say it warps space on its own. I'm not exactly sure of the particulars, but never mind that. But the interesting thing there is that it looks like a solution to the problem. Just have a domain battle with Gojo, and then you can hurt him. The problem is he can beat anyone in a domain clash. 1. So the one way you had of beating him doesn't work anymore because the writer was so concerned about making him the strongest that he invalidated the main thing that was meant to be his weakness. So the writer dug a hole for himself. He went and got dirt to fix the hole, but he just dug another hole. You see what I'm saying? But what was I about to say? But anyway, so he needs another solution, right? And the first thing he does to get another solution, he turns around and invents domain amplification. You see what I'm saying? He literally had to go make another power to justify it. You see what I'm saying? He had a solution. But he invalidated the solution, and then he had to make a whole new solution. And I'm pretty sure there's a step in the middle I'm forgetting somewhere, but you get the idea. He had to invent domain amplification. But yeah. I think barriers in JJK are actually pretty interesting in general. Because the way that they seem to work, obviously aside from the literal barrier part, is that, well, there's the idea that they can regulate spaces, not just what comes in and out of them, but they can actually regulate the rules inside that space, which is actually kind of funny, all things considered, because that's kind of what a domain itself does. It's not mutually exclusive, obviously, which is why you can combine them. But the weird thing about it is that you can combine, like, you can enchant barriers with different types of rules. And as a result, you can enchant the barrier with the domain. It's kind of funny. It checks out. At face value, it checks out. Now there's some basic stuff regarding simple domain and hollow wicker basket that I have some problems with. In fact, I have a lot of issues with simple domain. I don't feel like doing it right now for the same reason I mentioned in the other stream. I don't know if I feel like doing all that right now. It's kind of tedious. You guys will get the video eventually. Don't worry, though. Yeah, I think one of the biggest issues with JJK is that some of the abilities aren't distributed properly. I feel like, well, there's that, and then there's the fact that some of the powers, he doesn't let the characters develop them and use them properly, like barriers, for example. There's technically a metric crap ton of stuff you can do with barriers, but the writer doesn't usually let the characters experiment with them fully. Like some characters do, obviously, right? For example, every character with a domain does. Like for example, do, uh, every character with domain expansions, completed ones, uses barriers, right? But there's a lot of stuff barriers can do. Barriers can be used elusively or illusory, right? Like as illusion wise, right? To hide things. You can use it. How do I explain this? What was I about to say? You can use it for literal physical protection. In theory, you could use barriers like to block attacks just defensively, like an actual barrier, right? Of course, you can argue that characters don't use it that way because it's too complicated, right? The problem is, it being complicated is not valid unto itself. It's an excuse for why characters don't use it. The system would be a lot more dynamic and interesting if the characters were allowed to do it, because barriers themselves do so many things, right? But most characters' ability to use barriers, it's relegated towards like very special characters, like for example, the Star Platinum dude. What is that guy's name? Like for example, Tengen being the barrier guy, and then there's Kenjaku over here, who's the villain. I don't know if he should count. Of course, he gets the. There's all these crazy things you can do with barriers, but they're mainly relegated to either those two characters who get to use them to their fullest potential, right? Or you, for the most part, only use them for domain expansion and simple domain. Aren't they also costly to perform? It might be. I have to double check because it's made very clear that they're very very difficult to. It's very difficult to make barriers. This probably doesn't apply to simple domain, because characters who use simple domain tend to spam that. So I don't think it exactly applies for that. But the interesting thing about that is that would imply that it's not the barriers themselves that are difficult. It's whatever effect it is that you're trying to put into the barrier and how well you refine the barrier that makes it difficult. I imagine it doesn't only take cursed energy, it probably takes a lot of actual effort too. But when it comes to domain expansions, most of the exhaust and burnout comes from the domain itself. Sukuna just dodging rules with binding vows. I just love it also that his powers are based off of the kitchen. Bro is literally cooking. I feel like Gege had the same idea. A habit of inventing powers to justify another power always leads to a plot hole or inconsistency/inaccuracy. Unless you invent yet another power, it goes infinitely, and you can't rewrite forever. That would make a lot of sense. Sukuna is glazed as far as he is because he works to do as much as he can on the gamble of the amplification effect. Yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah, I really wish domain amplification got used a lot more, but yeah, there's a lot of cool stuff in JJK, like, and a lot of it seems random too. Oh yeah, one really dumb thing, and this is one of the reasons that I recommend people stay away from math and magic systems. You can use it, right, in very simple ways, right? But as a cautionary tale, we have Gege, who he himself admits that he wrote the math in a very stupid ass way. I say that in advance so that, because when I say this, people get mad at me like I'm just attacking Gege, but he himself admits that this shit is stupid. So keep that in mind. Keep that in mind. He himself thinks the math doesn't make sense in his system. All right. What are they called? Reverse curse technique and Black Flash are both really stupid. I think Black Flash is worse. Black Flash is bad because notice how Black Flash, when you land, it multiplies the power of the attack by an exponent. The exponent of 2.5. So you're amplifying the attack by the 2.5th power. Let's do some basic math real quick. All right. 1. Where's the exponent button, Isaiah? Exponent 2.5. Let's see what we get. Ah, crap, I'm on images. I'm on AI mode. That's not worthwhile. The answer is 1. Reverse curse is awesome in concept, but I'll get to that in a second. Anyway, what was I about to say? The problem is the way the scaling works is it doesn't give you a solid answer on how much a black flash increases power. Because obviously, if I was to multiply by 1.1 with that same exponent, you're not even getting a 30% increase, right? But if I do, say, 12, you're getting thousands upon thousands more power. You see what I'm saying? Well, that's 112, but you see what I'm saying. So depending on what number you get, the change in exponent, it changes drastically. So the problem is we literally have no idea how much a black flash improves your power. It could be anywhere near, for example, it could be anywhere near a couple of times increase, right? All the way up to hundreds of thousands of times, depending on what number you put in. We don't fucking know. We have no idea. And he doesn't tell us what number counts. I don't need exact power scaling, right? But if you told me that, for example, if you just said, oh, it's 2.5 times, that would make a lot more sense. The funny part is, and people get mad at me when I say this, if you look at the increase in power most of the time when someone lands a black flash, it's around 3 times usually. From what it looks like, at least. You could argue it's around 2.5 or 3 times increase in power, right? But then when I say that, people go, no, Isaiah, you're wrong. It's an exponent. Yes, I know that, but the writers in it... Let me stop talking. You get the idea. Gege Akutami is very creative. I'll have to give him that. But he doesn't know a lot of things, and he is lazy. That's not necessarily bad. You think you're lazier than him. Okay, fair enough. Gotta love when we have a concrete number, but the scaling is unknowable. Hold on, we might have fallen into his trap. This might just be him dodging the power scaling the whole time. Who's to say for sure? Who could tell the difference? I think it's 2.5. I watched it in Japanese and German. And they say that the first time black flashes get introduced, it nearly triples your attack power. I will have to note, though, Teraba Ninja, you are correct. It does say that. But the problem with JJK is the translations are very bad. I don't know if that applies in German, right? Because there's what was I about to say? I think he actually has one of those volume extras where he talks about it to try to clear it up. So he did, in one version they did actually refer to it as a multiplier by mistake as opposed to an exponent. In one of his chapter extras, he explains why he wanted it to be an exponent as opposed to a multiplier, because he wanted it to signify how significant it was. He didn't want it just to be a multiplier because he thought it wasn't like a big enough deal. That reminds me though, yeah, a lot of the translations for JJK are just really bad, to the point where I don't even know if I should use the original translations, right? The translations cause so many different arguments. Because people will be on Reddit saying, why do people say this, and this about how curse energy works? And I will go back to the anime, and I'm like, the anime literally says that shit word for word. I'm like, what are you talking about? But I'll go to the manga, and it says something different. There are people walking around who don't even know how Mekomaru's powers work, because when he explained it differently in the anime. Depending on which translation you're using, he explains it differently in the manga than he does the anime. But yeah. Whew. Now the next problem that I have I want to talk about is the official manga. My bad. The official English manga translation is butchered. Oh yeah, you're absolutely true. You're absolutely correct about that. It is definitely butchered. I think the I think halfway through the story, the guy who was translating got fired, but I'm not exactly sure. Jerry Hertz or whatever his name is straight up inserted domain expansion where it wasn't included. Yeah, yeah, yeah. You're right about that. What was I about to say? Now, since we already brought it up, let's go ahead and talk about reverse curse technique. There are a lot of people who are confused about it, right? The problem is when people explain reverse curse technique, they don't actually explain the part that they're confused about. Let me explain it. So basically, what's reverse curse technique? Reverse curse technique is taking cursed energy. So the idea is that cursed energy can only it can't heal, right? Because it's inherently negative power, it can't do something positive. Therefore, you have to get a positive energy to do that. This is already problem number one. This is stupid central right here because in order for this to be true, you have to have an extremely specific interpretation of what something positive is. Obviously, healing should fall in that category, right? Especially for a being not a cursed spirit, right? But by that logic of it not being able to do something positive or constructive, there's a lot of stuff we see it do in the system. Like if you were to just look at the story, go from start to finish, there are a number of random things you see cursed energy doing where you could stop and go, should it really be able to do that by this logic? But that's not even the biggest deal. I can let that go because I don't feel like dealing with it. I can just let that go, right? So what do you do to get reverse curse technique? Well, you take cursed energy, right? And multiply it against itself. It's that classic GJ Akutami math we talked about earlier. Well, you take a negative number, right, against a negative number, you multiply them together, and you get a positive number. Makes sense. Now, there are points later in the story. I can't remember exactly where it is. Maybe somewhere in before Shinjuku Showdown. It was somewhere in the Culling games. It might have just been a translation issue, though, where someone refers to using reverse curse technique is like using twice the amount of energy. I can't remember exactly. I might have got that wrong. But even ignoring that, we have a bit of an issue here. So let's assume this is exactly how it works. You can multiply negative energy against itself to get positive energy. There's a couple problems with this. For starters, this directly implies that you can multiply energy. We already fucked up. This is horrifying. What do you mean you can multiply energy? This isn't like Kaioken, like boosting your power level and your strength temporarily. We are literally taking allotments of energy and multiplying them. The sheer implications of that in the system is horrifying. Xavier Thomas says, reverse curse technique was a terrible addition, at least as long as Mahito wasn't going to be the main villain. I could spend a good sum of time talking about why Mahito was actually perfect. Yeah, he probably should have stuck around for a lot longer. Like we ever hear the love manifests the most twisted curses despite love being positive. Alright, here's another problem for you, right? So not only can you multiply negative numbers to get positive numbers, but if you multiply a positive number with a negative number, you get a negative number. Let's talk about that real quick. Now, obviously, and this is the classic Jege Akutami math I just talked about. Let's say we have negative 2 energy, right? Times negative 2 energy, right? You can multiply energy against itself, right? The problem is, are you setting aside 2 different sources of energy to multiply against each other? Because you could theoretically multiply any amount of energy by any amount of energy. And by that regard, you could almost have limitless energy. Unless we assume that the inherent process has some flaw in it that makes it impossible. In which case, if I said that or assumed that, I would be writing for the writer. I don't think he deserves that. Is it though? Because it exists in the system as is, changing multiples, the strength of an attack power would be your positive multiplication. Yeah, that's the fucking problem. That's the problem. You're getting infinite fucking energy. Even if we assumed like Tower of God logic, right? That the increments themselves have the same amount of power, right? I don't know why he didn't just say negative energy could also be used to regeneration. It makes sense within the magical system. That's a good point. I'm going to get back to that in a second. But by this logic, now that I've gotten 4, assuming I didn't use all my cursed energy, I can say multiply that by -2, right? Now I got more negative energy. If I take one increment of negative energy and another increment of negative energy, and I multiply them, I'm always going to be getting more out of it. I'm going to be getting more. That's how a multiplier works, right? That's just how a multiplier works. If I take 5 energy and 5 energy and get 25, I always have more energy, right? And there's nothing stopping me from multiplying positive energy against negative energy. And if there is, here's the fun part. If there is a reason that you can't do that, you would also have to bear the responsibility of looking me in the eye and trying to explain why that isn't arbitrary bullshit. That would be a completely arbitrary rule because the writer doesn't know what he's doing, right? That would just be the writer exposing that he doesn't make any sense. So either it's infinite multiplying energy or the writer just gives up and admits he's an idiot. By this point, people who run out of energy while using reverse curse technique, I don't know how they do it. It would be really hard. Unless there's a base amount of energy that you have to use. And Sukuna is the upper limit of that process. We know it isn't endless multiplication, there's just a really high ceiling. That's correct. But for 99.9% of the time, what's it called? That ceiling would never be reached. It would just be the sheer amount of energy you would be able to produce. You see what I'm saying? And if you wanted to do a thought experiment with that, you could just take the number 100 and start separating it into pieces and multiplying those pieces. The amount of energy you would have as a result would be so freaking high, it's not realistic to assume that a person would run out ever. Like, you can argue that, okay, Sukuna versus Gojo, you can argue that in really extreme fights, they'd run out, right? What about all the other characters who use it? You see what I'm saying? Like, imagine, like, for example, what's that guy's name? Yuji. Yuji already has a lot of cursed energy. We've seen him fight and use reverse curse technique while fighting and run out. That's why he has to use, what's her name? I forget her name. That's why he has to use Rika to replenish his cursed energy during his fights. Because he uses so much energy regenerating. You see what I'm saying? But with the sheer amount that he has and the sheer amplification you get from multiplying, it shouldn't be a thing. It shouldn't be an issue for him. Especially fighting people he was fighting in the Culling games. Don't get me wrong, they were powerful people, right? But Ryu, like, okay, you're gonna run out of energy. You're gonna run out of energy fighting Ryu, a lady that doesn't even have that significant attack power. She just has hacks, which is good. It's strong, right? And then a cockroach. So you're going to run out of energy fighting a lady who can warp space. Ryu, who just shoots energy blasts, which allegedly, according to the writer and the fans, is not an efficient way of fighting most of the time, but never mind that. And a giant cockroach. Are you kidding me? This is who we're fighting? You're going to run out of energy? Don't get me wrong. If it's a hard fight, that's fine. But he should have never ran out of energy in that regard. His energy, in most cases, should effectively be infinite. Chants are really more like addition. You aren't actually reproducing the same power over and over again. Multipliers are for things that are equal. Well, if that's the case, the writer needs to do a better job at explaining this. Consider this. Multiplying the cursed energy by itself is a division. Not necessarily. And if it was, it would be in direct contradiction from the way the writer expressed it. which is actually, by the way, to give you the benefit of the doubt, extremely believable. Gege is, I go on record saying that he's terrible at explaining things any day of the week. But yeah, and that's the problem I have with crazy systems like this. The only way to make them make sense is to devoid the actual explanation. It is the only way to make them make sense is to go to what is being shown and said and make it out to be something else. Even writers themselves do this when they retcon things and explain things differently later on. The only way to make them make sense sometimes is to say, psych, actually it's something else. It's like we have to defeat the purpose of the explanation to make the explanation work in the first place. Tell me I didn't just spend 20 minutes talking about JJ Akutami. I don't think he deserves this much time out of me right now. Let's talk about something else. He has a bad habit of touching on things and then just leaving them there. He brings in barriers, explains how they work, then forgets to actually think how characters would interact with them. I'm like, what do you mean you could pick up a piece of a barrier? I was like, you didn't tell me this earlier. Oh, and one thing, I don't know if I'm misunderstanding JJK's magic system, but I think that curses come from the feelings slash thoughts of people. Mahito represents the fear of other people. Where's the curse of death? Ah! You just asked a very dangerous question, my man. Yeah, it's difficult. It's difficult. Yeah, JJK is kind of interesting in that regard. And that's another issue that I have with it that I'll probably talk about in the video whenever I criticize it. Um, Cursed energy as a core concept, not just the system as a whole, as the core concept has a metric crap ton of wasted ass potential. It really does. It really does. So you have cursed energy, which is based off of people's negative emotions, right? Makes sense. Now, depending on exactly your interpretation, we have a bit of an issue. Because the way he explains it in the beginning is that more negative emotions equals more cursed energy. The problem is, oh yeah, and we see that characters get stronger or seem to have access to more energy when they utilize their negative emotions, right? That's something to talk about a couple of times. You have to be careful not to... Shit, my bad. I'm talking about JJK again. Hold on a second. Let me rethink my life for a second. Hold on. Do I even care enough to talk about this? I'll finish this one point and I'll be done with that. Ah, crap. I'm doing it again. Yeah. The problem is the writer can't seem to decide exactly how it works. Because there are cases where it looks like people are getting stronger when they have more negative emotions, right? Where, especially in the manga, where you can see them explaining it and saying it. There's also imposed curses and those that are hexed more like a curse. Yeah, they actually, you're right about that, Certified Otaku Fan. They do mention that in, I think they first mentioned that in JJK Zero, actually. That's one of the first things they explain, is that when you curse a person, those are like threads or knots linking you to that curse. Which is another thing they could have, I think the story could have used a little bit better, but that's besides the point. What was I about to say? But at the same time, despite the fact that it looks like characters can get stronger when they have more negative emotions, the writer also makes it very clear in not only what characters say, but the animation, like the drawings and the illustrations, that by not being careful with the energy that you have when your negative emotions run high, you can waste energy. He also implies that you can tire yourself and run out by doing that, which doesn't really make sense to me. Because with that logic that, seeing as curse energy comes from negative emotions, you know what I'm saying? As long as you have those negative emotions, you should never really run out. Of course, then there is also the thing we get very early on in the story where the writer explains what was I about to say? Where the writer explains that people who are good at jujutsu, they can draw out cursed energy even when their negative emotions fluctuate, whether they're high or low. At face value, that makes sense. On second thought, though, that defeats the darn purpose of fucking cursed energy, being associated with negative emotions. So the writer wants them to be associated with negative emotions, but he keeps doing extra shit to separate it from negative emotions. And by doing so, he makes it much more similar to a typical mana-based magic system. So he takes all the things that could have made the energy system unique, and he methodically separates the system from whatever limitations that would result from it. So basically, cursed energy, while cursed, it's not truly cursed energy a lot of times. It's definitely cursed unto itself or negative, but it's not really directly as associated from negative emotions as the writer says. Of course, another interesting thing that I like, that I wish the writer was better at, this is why I don't like having one energy source to rule them all. If cursed energy was a category of energies that were different, that covered different emotions or feelings, that would be great. Or there were different ways to lean into them as schools of thought or different types of abilities, that'd be great. But my problem is the way a lot of cursed spirits are made. It implies that cursed energy has different qualities or expressions to it based off of where it comes from. But the disaster curses are one of the only cases in which this ever actually matters. It doesn't seem to matter for the most of the rest of the system. So what do you mean that there's inherent, for example, the cockroach curse? It's manifested from all the fear. He said in Japan, by the way, there could be another cockroach curse in America. I'm terrified to see what it looks like. It's probably 100 times worse, but that's besides the point. What was I about to say? But yeah, so if a disaster curse comes from the inherent fear, and that's another thing. When he talks about the disaster curses being made of fear specifically, right? How cursed energy creates monsters. The negative emotions and cursed energy gather up to create creatures, but fear of specific creatures makes the disaster curses. It's really a strange bottleneck, because fear isn't the only negative emotion that should be associated with cursed energy. You can have anger, hate, annoyance, envy. You see what I'm saying? So where are all these other negative emotions represented in disaster curses or other cursed spirits? This all goes into Gege Blitzkrieging character writing. In order to write a system directly tied to emotions, you need to be able to explore and complete character development. I agree with that wholeheartedly. There's also the potential that it doesn't bottom out and only goes up. That's also true. All things that I wish he was better at handling. This is true. We're getting somewhere here. You see what I'm saying? And the reason I'm so harsh on him with cursed energy specifically is because, like I mentioned earlier, with those essences and exhausts, the magic system that I write in heavily, parts of it revolve around emotion significantly. There is no basic energy for positive or negative emotions. Those are separate categories, because energies can be positive or negative. That doesn't mean there's any one type of each, right? For example, one way I was experimenting with doing it, for example, I recently realized that I have to rework it a little bit to make it more complicated. But for positive emotions and negative emotions, I decided for a while to categorize them like this: internalized, externalized, and intermediate. For example, you can have an internal manifestation of positive emotion, an external manifestation of positive emotion, which would be something like love that connects you to other people. It affects other things outside of yourself. And then there's the intermediate. You could have that same thing for negative emotions. For example, you could have one example of an externalized negative emotion would be hate or spite. It is the manifestation of your negative emotion against the world or against other creatures, right? Versus negative emotions on the opposite side of that spectrum that only afflict you, that build up inside of you and directly affect yourself. This goes into basic psychology. Some people actualize their negative emotions and some people internalize them. You see what I'm saying? But then fear would be the intermediate because it's a recognition, it's an internal recognition of an external danger or threat. It's a recognition of your frailty as a creature. So you get the negative, you get the both positive and negative, you get the internal, the external, and the intermediate. That's just an example of how you could have done it. Like I said, I do have to rework it. Either I have to rework it or I have to expand on the individual categories and make them more flexible. Different disaster curses associated to different negative emotions creates different classes of curses, making the world richer. Great idea. Exactly. Yep, you're absolutely right. This is why I'm so hard on him, because when it comes to emotional based magic systems, I've been doing that shit for 15 years. So believe me when I say he wasted almost all his potential. I respect if you think what he's done is cool, right? But from experience, as a writer who's experienced in the thing that he only dips his toes into, he missed 95% of the potential. He needs to go back to the drawing board and do it again. Well, he won't. He probably doesn't even like the series anymore. He was so ready to stop writing JJK, it's ridiculous. Again, with cursed energy, it's implied to be a living force and that it's oppressive. Love manifests twisted curses despite being the strongest positive force. Imposes hexes and positive. Now see, how does that work into the whole reverse curse thing? Because if we can just decide, nope, positive stuff is going to become negative and that's how it works. That's just him avoiding developing positive energy, which is another wasted potential. There should be a lot more things that positive energy in the setting can do, right? It should be a lot more developed. What I would do if I was to rewrite JJK, which I wouldn't, I don't like it enough to do that. What I would do if I was to rewrite JJK is I would give it a stronger yin-yang aspect. Let me explain. You see this? So maybe there's a strong bias towards the negative energies and that's how most of the powers work. That's fine. I think there should be an equal inverse to all of it. And I think humanity as a race, if we want them to lean towards negative aspects, we can just make that bias towards the cursed energy, right? Maybe they just generate more cursed energy and there are more cursed techniques as opposed to blessed techniques, right? And then all the angelic or blessed positive stuff is just harder for them to find. They have to go through more alternate means to get it or access it. Of course, that could also be used, doesn't have to, but it could also be used with, what's it called? Heavenly restrictions. It could be that there are actual deities or gods or angels or whatever, right? That are actually imposing things onto them. And that could be its own world building where we interact with them more heavily. That doesn't fit the themes, to be fair. Well, let's be honest. Some of his themes are shit anyway. But besides, what I'm saying here, and I thought about this extensively, what I'm talking about here, could easily be reworked because the concept of yin and yang is very basic and very simple. It could very easily be reworked to fit into those themes anyway. Especially, like I said, if we give humanity an inherent bias towards the negative, you get 90% of the utility in the same magic system with a lot more opportunity. Of course, some of that opportunity, I think the reason that characters don't have it is just because the writer just doesn't know how to deal with it. Like, for example, the fact that we almost never see anybody's curse technique reversal, to the point where I've had a lot of people argue with me that people's curse technique reversals of that about that. Yeah, Yuji having arguably the only positive domain despite being full of the most negative energy, which is such a good note to build off of. I don't think it was. As an idea, it's perfectly fine, right? But the mechanics have to be there. And quite frankly, the mechanics weren't there. We wouldn't be having this discussion if they were, I assure you. But that's like 35 minutes of Gege right there. I think I'm done with this. We gotta talk about something else. I'm not gonna lie, I strongly disagree. If there are themes, I don't think he utilizes them well. As I talked about in the Star Wars video, you can have all the themes you want to, but they don't excuse anything. You gotta make them bad boys work. The mechanics have to be there. The underlying logic, it has to be there, it has to be consistent. But anyway, like I said, enough JJK. Does anybody have any non JJK related questions? No non JJK related questions? What's the greatest theme you've ever read in a story? Really broad question, but something different for the stream. Let's see. All right, so let's see. So Ninja, I see your question here. Can you elaborate on your definition of anti-power fantasy? I'll answer that in just a second after I answer Thomas's question. Let's see. What is the greatest theme of all time? Yeah. I mean, what is your definition of an anti-power fantasy specifically? I'm not trying to be pedantic. Oftentimes, the devil's in the details. You can often find that we use the same word for things, and we might mean similar things. We don't always mean exactly the same thing. It's good to make our definitions known so that we're on the same page. I've had some pretty stupid conversations or debates with people, both in real life and on the internet, because we refuse to accept the same definitions of terms while we were discussing things, and it effectively turns the situation into one where we're arguing about two completely separate things. It can just get out of hand is all I'm saying. But for the greatest theme you've ever read in a story, the greatest theme I've ever read in a story, I might be biased. Communication breakdown, you're right about that. I would say the greatest theme is the one we're looking at on screen right now, this yin yang. This yin yang positive negative balance stretch is probably one of the single most versatile concepts I have ever experienced in my entire life. To the point where I can point to different series and works of fiction that use it and use it completely differently. You see what I'm saying? It's in Star Wars, it's in Naruto, it's in my own work. It's in not Wheel of Time, my bad. I never finished Wheel of Time. I only read part of the first book. Was that work? Brandon Sanderson's Mistborn. It's in Mistborn too, because you have the god of preservation and the god of ruin, right? And there are some works of fiction where that yin and yang is order and chaos, right? Of course, for me, when I use it, I don't use it that way. I don't use it in a moral sense. I use it as for example, I think of it as a balance between substance and order. You often see in a lot of art and philosophy the concept of the abyss. A person either gazing at the abyss to find something, or to gaze into the abyss, or even to pour out the abyss and spread it out into something. Take that dangerous, ambiguous, unknown nature and manifest it into something more solid, like spreading out paint on a canvas. This is probably one of the broadest and most flexible themes I've ever experienced in writing. But I feel that I might be using it in such a vague way that it doesn't completely answer your question. So let's explore some other ideas. Greatest I've seen is Atonement at All Personal Cost. That's actually a good one. That's actually a good one. I've kind of thought about that. That stories like that can be pretty interesting, where the story goes like, all right, I fucked up. Now the story is going to be about me fixing it, or maybe you only realize at the end of the story, right? Maybe the character's crashing out and they realize they have an issue and they make up for it at the end, right? Or maybe it's a character, maybe it's even a side character, right, that does something, betrays someone, or fails someone in a way that they come to regret, and maybe they sacrifice themselves at the end of the story to fix that, or do everything in their power to get at least something close to that. Or like you see in what's that story called? My Hero Academia, because there's that I don't like the way the writing was set up as a whole, but that's besides the point. Technically speaking, the theme is there. How Deku and Lemillion kind of fumbled the bag with Eri. I mainly blame Lemillion. That's kind of why he was there at that point, was just to get in the way of the plot so that we'd have a story. And they don't save Eri from Overhaul when they were supposed to, when they could have. And so the rest of that story arc exclusively exists because they didn't get away with Eri the first time. So yeah, there's stuff like that. And as a result, Lemillion ends up losing his quirk protecting Eri. Which honestly sucks to suck. He kind of earned that for getting in the way of the plot. But he got it back later, so who cares? Let me get back to the comments. So, power fantasy is usually... Wait, my bad. Power fantasy is usually a system one can master or get pretty OP with. Power fantasy is what literally says fantasy of powers like solo leveling or JJK or sorry, really. That's why I want to create something to oppose that idea. I don't know what anti-power fantasy is. I didn't read anything about or saw a work where magic is cruel or volatile or dangerous. That's interesting. Let me think for a second. Let me think for a second. Anti-power fantasy. I'm still thinking about that anti-power fantasy. I'm going to get back to you in just a moment. Anti-power fantasy would be a power system with serious consequences, I think. I also have to read Brandon Sanderson. Yeah, I've only read some of his books, mainly the Mistborn ones. In my opinion, he's a relatively respectable writer. He's very coherent. He's not perfectly consistent, but I don't think anybody is, so that's besides the point. Um, his Mistborn series is one of the few series I've read where the explanation of the system is semi-complicated, where it's actually worthwhile. Like the actual mechanics of the system that he explains in the first book are actually a pretty big ass deal. Like all of them are a big deal. Like you can kind of crack the series wide open if you're paying attention in the first few pieces of exposition of the system. Like you can figure almost everything out. It's crazy. I actually think that was it. I was thinking more about specific stories that utilize the theme, but the question was generally answered. That's fair enough. Human transmutation in FMA, but it's trapped in a power fantasy. FMA did a good job, actually. Very good job. I liked it a lot. If that's the probable definition of an anti-power fantasy, then I think I've achieved it with another character, partly inspired from the Elkmen, and entirely from the Roblox game Grace. Interesting. So what are my opinions on anti-power fantasy? Well, they have their place just like anything else. At face value, I don't think there's anything wrong with, I will note, I don't think there's anything wrong with, at least in the definition that we have here in the chat, I don't think there's anything wrong with the idea of power fantasy unto itself. The problem comes in when it leans too thick into it. Like all concepts, you have to consider the fact that most stories and works of fiction are a neat organization of many different concepts put together. And the problem is When a power fantasy becomes mainly a power fantasy and nothing else, that's when you get your problem. Now, as for an anti-power fantasy, that's actually a good question. For example, I guess in that sense, that would be a magic system that you can never completely control. And because you can never completely control it, you can never completely master it. There's a place in the world, there's definitely a place in the world for works like that. For example, you get things like, as simple examples, genie's lamps and monkey's paws. You can never master those. You see what I'm saying? There are constraints that can screw you over that you just have to accept or deal with. And that's just a part of the story, right? Depending on how strong the sacrifices are in a system, then you can argue that a system with sacrifices, you can argue it fits this description. The question is, do those sacrifices work? And if they do work, you still have to be very careful. Again, I talked about this. The reason I made this threat cost video, if you guys have never seen it, this is probably one of the most important videos I've ever made ever. Because whenever I talk to people who are building their works, they always want something that's dramatic and serious. And usually that results in people making drawbacks and costs. Completely understandable. But you also have to be careful with it because there are so many ways of doing it wrong. And that's where I think the concept of anti-power fantasy can sometimes fall apart. But it's not a given. You can solve that just like you can solve anything else. Warlocks could fall under that category. It just depends on the exact rules. Human transmutation. I think it's probably, let's see. I really enjoy the symbolic relationship between desire for power and Bleach and being directly tied to personal insight. So when you get to the end, that's the road you reach satisfaction with yourself. That makes sense, yeah. At least to me. I don't know for sure. I haven't read it all yet. It seems to make sense to me. You have all the power but no desire to use it because you're at Zen. Yeah. Yeah, that reminds me. I experimented with a system that I never exactly used. It was a remix of another system that I use. And the idea was that the magic system was you tapping into like the ultimate power in the universe. I didn't make a story out of it because I just wasn't interested enough. And the thing was, the power itself was the source of all potential and utility. But the problem is, the more of that potential and utility you have, the less defined you become as a creature because you inherently become something larger and less defined. You gain less limits, but as a result of that, you start to lose yourself. And in theory, you can reach nirvana at the end where you become all powerful, but you just become a part of that power itself because you lose all identity. I thought the idea was really interesting and had some potential, but I didn't write it because I just didn't think it matched my style of writing. I don't like writing stuff like that. But if someone else wants to do something like that, or there are other systems like that that exist, I respect that. Mr. Krabs was not feeling it. I think anti-power fantasy is by far the most interesting to me, only because there's way more interplay in the dynamics of how they work. You might have a point with that, right? Like, you could also do a number of, like what I do, right? I like to write stories with multiple magic systems in the story. You can argue, okay, it could be a Mistborn situation. Like, you can pedantically argue, the writer himself argues that Mistborn has 3 magic systems in it, right? Depending on exactly how you organize the thoughts, you could argue that it has 5. Or you could argue that all of them are different extensions of the same thing, therefore being one magic system. I don't really care about how many you think there are. To me, it makes no difference because it's the same rules regardless. But I like to make magic systems that have different amounts. I mean, not different amounts. I like to make stories that have different categories of magic system within them, right? And you can have one be a power fantasy where it's straight up mastery based, right? Where you gotta learn it, you gotta think about it, you gotta figure it out. But then there are other systems where you might not have a strong stake in them. You got to throw your hands up in the air, like listen, okay, maybe I can't use this power. Maybe there are fairies in the world. I'll never have control of that power, right? I just have to hope I'm in good standing with the forces that do, right? That's an anti power system. It can be used to your detriment or as a boon to you, right? But at the end of the day, you got to throw your hands up in the air and be like, listen, I'm not the one who gets to say in how well this works. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's somebody else's choice, right? And that can work really well both if that force that has that power is a character or is not. For example, you could portray those entities as just a force of nature, or you could actually make them characters. You can kind of see that in some Greek mythology with the gods and stuff like that, where if the gods like you, you're up, right? It's not you mastering anything; it's the gods helping you because you have favor with them. And on the other hand, if they don't like you, then you might get turned into a spider. You get what I'm saying? That's anti-power fantasy for you right there. You should read the with a single spell. With a single spell. It's something comedic and has an apprentice who only knows spark fire. Whereas power fantasies have a bad habit of giving you one ability and ruling the entire universe with it. You're spitting. That is absolutely true. You are absolutely correct. Whew. So a magic system grounded in memory could become anti-power fantasy if you bargain with your memories, losing them, or some form of corruption, maybe transferring and trading memories for power. That could be the case, right? But also remember, Lewin, your system where you mentioned in your system that it doesn't just revolve around memories; that those memories can branch out. So that could be your source of anti power fantasy. It doesn't have to be that you literally lose something, right? You don't have to literally lose something for it to be an anti power fantasy, right? You don't have to give up your memories. I mean, you could do that, right? But if you want my humble ass opinion, right? Actually, in this case, it's not humble at all. I speak from a place of expertise. If you want my whole opinion, I think losing memories is too fucking easy. It's too fucking easy. There are cases where it can work. Like I said, anything can work. In your case, I think it's too easy. I would suggest finding something else. You got a lot of different opportunities, especially since the system revolves directly around memory, right? Because memories branch out in real life. Memories are based off of association. You can't control exactly how memories grow. You can memorize something, right? And you can try your best to have strong associations, but you don't have absolute power over exactly what associations are built. The chains of memories, right? And even in real life, you alter a memory and build a new association every time you recall it. So you're slowly altering the memory over time. You have a lot of potential when it comes to the drawback of that system, because memory itself is a very well documented thing, even if we don't understand it. We have a lot of logic that we already know that you can draw off of, and then you also have a lot of opportunity for creative license. Oh, I somewhat wrote that. In my system, a dragon is a person who has lost their humanity to embodying an idea. You become an avatar of vengeance and lose yourself. Common example. Yeah. I actually think that at the essence of every power, there is a path to omnipotence. The only thing that stops that is the magical system. Okay, that's an interesting thought process. About trading memories for power, I think it falls more on the consequence of magic instead of the magic being essentially a tragic ability. Yeah, okay. I got the idea that my user will eventually become any corrupt to the memory they wield via corruption, getting traits from the elements or creatures they transform into. That's interesting. That might work. The dragon example is honestly the best phenomenon I can use to explain how I understand anti-power fantasy. That's fair. Yeah, that's perfectly fair. Yeah, yeah, yeah. The more you get that power, in a way, you've gotten that power, but you don't have the. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I agree with that. I agree with that. It's like you got a bunch of money, right? But in the process of getting money, you crash the economy, and now you have nothing to buy stuff with. You have nothing to buy because you destroyed the economy. I mean, that's not exactly the example you gave, but you get the idea. Yeah, I guess losing memories is too easy. That's why the idea of corruption and turning into the memory or gaining the trauma is a thing. I agree with that. That's true. Losing yourself while becoming a dragon is actually terrifying. That reminds me of Fate Apocrypha. It reminds me of Fate Apocrypha, but hopefully in this case the writing is better. Because Fate Apocrypha kind of made me mad. So there's this character named Sieg, right? Sieg is kind of, he has no personality whatsoever, but he's kind of funny. He's kind of an interesting creature because, like, he's not a real person. He's a homunculi. And the thing about homunculi is they have a lot of energy, they generate a lot of magical power, right? But they also fall apart very quickly. They're not built to last. So people use them as a magical resource. And that was kind of the crux of his issue. But one of the servants in the story kind of sympathized with him, and he gave him his heart. In doing so, he gave him his power. And that character was, if I'm not mistaken, that was Siegfried. I think that's the guy who slayed the dragon, the Fafnir guy or whoever it was, right? But the problem was, in his backstory, he bathed in the blood of the dragon to gain an he bathed in the blood of a dragon to gain like immortality. He wasn't completely invincible or anything like that, but he was mostly invincible, right? But the problem is when Sieg, the character, the homunculi, gained his power and started using it, every time he harnessed his power, it kind of corrupted his body. And the reason for that, it turns out it was the dragon's blood that from Fafnir that Siegfried had that was corrupting him. And if he used it too much, he wouldn't just die, he would turn into a dragon himself. But at least in the anime, I think that it could have been done a little bit better. But yeah, in concept, Sieg was crazy though, because he was like, okay, because in Fate Stay Night, there's homunculi, right? But then there's masters and servants, right? So he got the heart of a servant, got the servant's powers, but in doing so, he got some command seals and became a servant, and he also became a dragon. So he's like five things. It was kind of funny. I see. That's why I used exclamation marks. I kind of felt you meant it more as a title of power instead of actually a dragon like on an anime I found on Netflix though. Recently I forgot what it's called. No, it's like the idea of an actual dragon. Let me breathe for a second. I've been spewing a lot of hot air. Whew. I mean, there could be ones that turn into actual dragons. It's broad enough. Yeah, you're right about that. Wow. But yeah, ultimately there is a lot of potential for anti-power fantasy. I do agree with that. I do agree with that. Yeah, especially if it leans well with your specific style. Whew. How long has it been? 2 hours and 33 minutes. Hey everybody. It's been a minute. I'm gonna come out with this Datara video eventually, guys. Don't worry. It's the audio is a bit too long. It's gonna take a minute. All right. Does anybody have any non-mainstream suggestions when it comes to anime or something like that? Oh yeah, Art of the Explosion. Man, bro, Datara used to be my spirit animal. I love him. Not literally, obviously, not genuinely, but Yeah, I liked him. I liked him a whole lot. He freaky. He weird. He weird. I'm right. I still have to edit the video for his kid analysis. I like him. I like him a lot. Maybe next I'll do like Jiraiya or something. Maybe Kakashi. I don't know. Jiraiya, Kakashi. I considered doing Sasori, but he kind of. I don't know if I'm feeling it. I don't feel right. I like Sasori, but he almost kind of feels like a fraud right now. The Big O is a cerebral neo noir. Mech neo noir. That's a new sentence to me. I don't think I've heard that one before. Hold on a second. The Big O. What it is? This part, this really makes it look like Gurren Lagann right here, with that head. His power is so cool. I love the puppet a lot, though. I even have one tattoo as. Sorry, I'm reading kind of slow. I even have one tattooed as the symbol Naruto's potential for tactics. Very different from most shonen, sadly, very underappreciated. Yeah, man, you're right. That puppet jutsu is very, very cool. I feel like he's a fraud though. I like Sasori a lot. He's cool. He low key fraudulent though. Cause he got beat. Okay, look, I get, yeah, technically he let himself die. I get all that. I get all that. But the whole significance of Sakura being in that fight was that his constructs would be durable, and that by having the strength of Lady Tsunade, that she was gonna be able to like decisively do damage. But we've seen zero evidence in any version of the story that I've seen that his constructs are that durable at all. Like, we have no evidence to suggest that they're even that durable. You see what I'm saying? So it's like Shaman King is a bit mainstream, but much less so than many other series, like Naruto and the like. Shaman King. Shaman King. That takes me way back. It's been a while. So much so I don't even remember exactly what the story was about anymore. Wow, that latency is disgusting. Tactic wasn't the focus of the show. They chose to throw nukes at each other at the end. The very thing I hate to see in magical shows. All right, that's fair. Now, to be fair, let it be known this day, I do not actually have a problem with characters throwing nukes at each other. I just would have liked a heads up, that's all. I just would have liked a heads up. Like, the way the powers were portrayed from part 1 to part 2, there's a dramatic inflation. Kesern Sins is also cool. That's when I pulled that theme from. Okay, that's smooth. Matter of fact, while we're on the subject, the Big O, it was on Cartoon Network. How have I never seen this before? And why does it look so much like Gurren Lagann and the robot head right there? The Big O is a Japanese animated series created by director Kazuyoshi Katayama and designer of Keiichi Sato from Sunrise Studios. Interesting. I have to bookmark this one. I don't know how I missed this. And you say Kasern Sins. It's gas, man. The atmosphere of the music alone puts so many anime to shame. Well, I look forward to that then. Hey, has anybody here ever watched Shakugan no Shana? I'm just talking obscure stuff now. Well, I don't know if it's that obscure. I've just never heard another human being mention it out loud to me. I've never spoken to another person who knows what that is. Kasern Sins is actually a great recommendation, as well as Big O. Kasern Sins is probably one of my favorite ones from the late night Cartoon Network. Alright, Interesting. Bro, he got that Macross Saga hair, man. That's crazy. Hold on, let me bookmark this. I get the feeling this is gonna be like somebody's childhood. Hold on a second. Yeah, we gonna watch that later. Oh man, he got that Yukio hair. Gonna pop off. I've watched Shakugan no Shana. It was quite great. It was very interesting, right? You'll be surprised to know that I don't think the writing has to be the best thing since slice ham in order to be good. Many years ago, I saw 11 Eyes, and I always recommended it with an asterisk. Asterisk? I'm suspicious now. 11 Eyes? I remember seeing this wallpaper. I probably scrolled through this and almost watched it some years ago, but didn't. What is this about? I am not clicking anime list. I do not like this site. I do not have much respect for this site because the takes you get on this site are fucking crazy. Let me scroll somewhere else. At that patient of 11 Eyes produced by after losing his sister to 7 years ago. Bookmarked. What's the genre? You know I'm spitting, man, bro. Even like, listen. If y'all don't believe me on how stupid my anime list is, go to an anime you know you like, right? And then read the reviews for it. And then go to an anime you know you hate and read the reviews for it. Have you ever just looked at the list of. Hold on a second. Isaiah, where are you? I lost my point of reference. Where's the rankings, the scores? How do you. I can't remember. Have you ever just looked at the rankings on my anime list, bro? And just asked yourself how on this blue earth some of these ratings came to existence? Because there's some stuff that's rated way lower than it's supposed to be. And there's some stuff rated way higher. I'm not going to bring up any names specifically because I'm not trying to start no arguments right now. Helsing has trash scores for having an OPMC, but like, he's Bram Stoker's Dracula. What'd you expect? All right. I'm sorry if I look like a boomer right now. Give me just a second to remember how. There it is. Fry Ran. Okay, listen. Listen. I'm finna say something mad crazy. And y'all sweat now because he's like, oh no, is he about to say that he thinks Fry Ren is bad? I might have to unsubscribe. Nah, man, chill out. Hold on, slow down. I haven't watched Fry Ren yet. There's a very specific reason. I understand that it's probably written quite a bit better than some other works, and it's also pretty interesting too because it has 28 episodes. You don't see that very often. Gangsta, I meant to watch that a while ago. Fry Mid, and I love slow burns. Okay, that's fair enough. I have not watched Fry Ren yet. And the reason for that is because I read the synopsis. I respect the fact that it exists. It sounds like something I would have written, but it's not done in a way that I think I would like. Let me explain. It's probably good. It's probably fine. I feel like stories about the concept of something beyond a journey's end, you can do it without writing the journey first, right? You can do it after the fact, right? And then have like flashbacks and stuff. And there are even some probably unique things that you can do by doing it that way. I just think that there's more potential in writing the actual journey first and then having the journey's end be after it. Because you have more attachment, you have more reverence for it, and so on and so forth. You can get around that by being a good writer, right? I'm not saying that this is going to destroy the story. I'm just saying what I prefer. As a person who's written journeys, right? And I've written characters who've ended their journey and finished it, and even had to go on journeys after that or reminisce after it, or even just become part of the background world building. That's always been something that's special to me because I always built on my worlds, right? I mentioned last stream that I had an anthology, post-apocalyptic anthology. The story for that one has been going for literal hundreds of years, right? So there have been plenty of journeys for me, and there's been plenty of Beyond Journey's End. I feel like it means more if you get some of that journey beforehand. That's my preference. The story's probably still fine. I'm not indicting the story. I'm just saying this is Isaiah's preference. I'm not a normal person. You know that. Fry Rain is great, but the magic system is so soft. I almost don't even feel it's there. As a criticism, that and I'd offer that and that it's almost episodical until it needs to continue its story. Yeah, a lot of anime are like that, especially the classic one season wonders. They'll fool around for 8 episodes, right? With like one episode of foreshadowing in the middle somewhere. And then the last 3 episodes will try to be super serious. I'm not sure if it's like that with Fry Ran, but I've noticed that a lot. I've I don't think I don't think mid is bad, for the record. It's middle of the road. There's no shame in enjoying mid in my classification. That's perfectly fair. That's a fair assertion. That's a fair assessment. I would note. Okay, so remember everything I said about my anime list? I just now remembered they put Steins Gate here. I'm gonna go ahead and forgive anime list this once, all right? Because I like me some Steins Gate. I don't think it's perfect. I was making a video on it. I never finished it because I realized the system, I had so many more criticisms for it than I expected, and it made me feel bad on the inside, so I didn't make the video. You know, I'll criticize stuff I like, but it hurt my feelings, you know? I really love me some Steins Gate. Man, I like Steins Gate so much. Some of it, there are things I can critique or it should be better, and there's a lot of plot armor. There really is. There really is. The way the writer makes the time travel most of the time, it requires the extreme benefit of the doubt, right? You can get away with that if the character scenarios are interesting enough that the viewers are able to put up with it. It would always work for me if the writer had just done it better, but I still like it anyway. You see what I'm saying? I have a rule for one seasoners. Big, big, small. Big, big, small, bad. Small, small, big, bad. In reference to the threats they fight across the series. They will break so many rules to make ish up just so they can have an ending to watch. Yeah, man, you spitting, I'm telling you. You are absolutely correct in that. Oh man. But yeah, I like me some Steins Gate. Listen, if you have to criticize Steins Gate, I'm gonna let you do it. I ain't even gonna stop you. I'm not one of them fans. You got it. If it's not your cup of tea, that's fair. You got it. Whew. In the first couple episodes, I almost dropped it, because it was so weird. Like the main character was so weird. But I kind of like how weird he is. I do. He very clearly has some kind of Chinibio or something like that. He's very funny. Although I've heard he varies a lot from dub to sub, so I won't speak on that. One day I will actually play the game. I'm not a visual novel guy, virtual novel, whatever they're called. I don't. Every now and again, I'll try to play one. I'm sorry, I'm not trying to offend anyone. Every now and again, I'll try to play one, and I will cringe to death. Also, so many of them have porn in them. I can't in good conscience play this without dying of cringe sometimes, you know? So I've never finished one. That reminds me, the one I want to finish first is Little Busters. It's not the best anime ever or anything like that, but I do like this anime, and I realized it had a game, and I want to play the game. I keep not finishing it though. Once I spent an entire summer watching one season wonders. By this point, I'm burnt out on them for the next couple of years at least. Man, bro, you telling me. Some of them one season wonders crazy. Y'all ever watch, hold on a second. Do not watch this garbage ass anime. This shit will piss you off. This anime will make you mad. Cliffhanger, right? There are some interesting concepts in there, but the writer wasn't capable of dealing with them. Or maybe they just rushed the anime. I don't know. It's like 12 or 13 episodes. I like the main character's ability though. Yeah, he's got this please review Sword Guy, not Rage Bait. Trust in parentheses. I'm not gonna lie, man. That's mad suspicious. That's mad suspicious. But we gonna hold on a second. We gonna. I like Manta, so I'm gonna leave this one up. This thing is horrifying, so we're gonna get rid of that. Sword Guy, the animation. Look at that armor, though. Hold on a second. All right, so that art style slash drawing animation needs a little bit. It's a little bit of a work in progress. We might be able to make this work. What's it about? The Japanese manga series and its animation adaptation, Sword Guy, the animation, about a young man who becomes a weapon and joins a battle against the Shoshidai. The series explores a dark fantasy setting with themes of cursed weapons, humanity, and violence. Ooh, violence. Know how I am with violence. Was born but stupid pop-ups. Becomes Amon's apprentice and during the sword ceremony loses his right arm. Yeah, this is in fact an anime. You can tell because of this line right here. You can tell. To help him, forges the sword Shiryu. Guy's replacement. Okay, that might be worth it. Yes, this is indeed an anime. I can confirm. Right arms in anime are like moms in Disney movies. Man, don't even get me started, bro. I remember when I was first reading God of High School, right? And the comment section was going crazy because they were like, "Hey, why does everybody lose their arm?" It's like this guy got like an arm losing fetish or something like that. It was super weird. I haven't watched the anime. I read the manhwa or whatever it's called. I read the webtoon. I didn't finish it. Somewhere near the end, I got kind of pissed off because they tried to shoehorn in a prophecy, and I was like, "Bro, what is this?" But yeah. The first few chapters were pretty boring, but ultimately, it got better. It got better. It got better. It's a martial arts series that partially forgets about the martial arts, but then remembers it later on. So there's that. Be advised in that regard. Um, as for the magic system, there is potential. I cannot say that the writer used it to its full potential. I can't say that, unfortunately. Now, if you really want to be in for a long ride, there's good old Tog. Only real men make it past the hell train. This is also a webtoon. You can find this on webtoon too. It's a culture thing. Dismemberment is really tough over there, and decapitation is so tough they'll rarely ever show it when they depict it. Don't tell that to that lady from what's it called? What's that show called? Don't tell it to that lady from Hell's Paradise. She might get mad at you. God of High School almost seems interesting enough to start, but over 300 chapters was top much for me to start Webtoon. That's true. In fact, if I'm being honest, as much as I liked parts of it, I don't know if it's worth the read to everybody. First several chapters, like I said, are boring. The magic system has some interesting parts to it, but it doesn't use them to full capacity. The martial arts is great though when they're doing it. It's great. However, if you guys remember, I did make a video. Hold on a second. This is just in case anybody wanted to. You don't have to. But anyway, back to what I was about to say. Remember the video I made about not ditching your main characters? I didn't talk about him in the video. I didn't talk about the main character, Morihjin, in the video. He's based off the Monkey King, but notice he's in the thumbnail. You want to know why? Because that story drops him like he's hot. There are multiple years worth of story he does not show up in, where we have a clone of him that's fighting in his stead with a different personality, because the writer made him so powerful so quick he didn't know how to deal with him. So yeah, it might be worth your time, but be advised in that regard. It might not be. I've never thought about that. Actually makes sense, seeing the decapitations usually happen on the darkest part of the series. Yeah, you're right about that. You're right about that. That's my Cash App for anyone who's interested. You don't have to feel compelled for that. That's just if you want. Now, having said that, while we're on dismemberment decapitation, that actually reminds me. What was that show called? Have y'all ever watched Guilty Crown? Oh, you've never watched Guilty Crown? Okay, listen. So it's not perfect. I have a lot of criticisms of it. And people say there's a point where it gets bad near the middle, like a little bit after the middle. I still like it. It's worth criticizing, though. If you watch it and you cook it, that's perfectly fair. So it is a high school anime. Kinda, not really. Well, yeah, the guy's in high school. It follows this guy named Shu Alma. And so in that world, there's this illness where people's bodies crystallize over time. It really sucks if you catch it. You can get vaccines and you can treat it. It's just really difficult. You crystallize all the way over and you just die. I started it and almost got all the way to the end. Twist endings are usually a super easy turn off for me. Cool concept though. This is the perfectly valid summary of the series. Perfectly valid. What was I about to say? I can't remember the exact particulars, but there's actually, it's kind of like a sci-fi setting. There's a rebellion that the main character is not involved in, but they end up getting a hold of this power called I, I can't remember exactly what it's called, the right hand of the gods or something like that. And the way it works is, because of a series of unfortunate events, he actually ends up getting a hold of it and activating it instead of the person who it was supposed to go to. But the way it works is he can like reach into a person's soul and pull it out as a weapon, as a tool. Not all of them are weapons. Because he's the person who has the power, when he uses them, they can all be utilized as weapons. But it actually varies, and supposedly it tells you a lot about the character itself. And I guess there was supposed to be a character development thing, because Shu is not like a very well developed character. It was supposed to be used as a means for character development, and with my whole chest, I think they could have done better. But if you like semi sci-fi settings, there's some mecha, but it's not that serious. The magic is relatively inspiring, and the anime opening is bussing. Both of them anime openings popped off. I'm scared to show it because it might claim this stream, but you should. Hold on a second. Do I risk it? I don't know if I should risk it. But yeah, the anime, the opening is heat. The opening is heat, man. It's from Supercell. If you know Supercell, they're good. They made some opening and ending themes to Magi as well. If you've ever watched those, yeah, you're right. I don't want to get beamed. They made some of the openings and endings for Magi too. If you're interested, I think it's around 20 something episodes. 22 episodes, I think. If you're like me, you might get a little bit mad in the middle. People say that the first half and the second half feel completely different, and they do. They absolutely, for certain, do. Matter of fact, depending on your preferences, the first half you'll know exactly when it is. The first half that might be all you want. You might want to just stop there. Hot take: most mecha anime are honestly pretty nonsensical. Speaking of Magi, great series. Yeah, you're right. I'm gonna read the manga eventually. When I was younger, I didn't know this series existed. I saw that the Sinbad series came out because there's a spinoff for Sinbad, and I watched Sinbad first, and I didn't know there was a manga. I didn't know it was a prequel, right? And so I watched it, and years later, I found out Magi was a thing. I thought that was pretty interesting. And so I gave it a try, and I like it a great deal. I like it. Morgiana's cool. Sinbad, if I saw him get hit by somebody's car, I would not cry for him. Alibaba's Alibaba. What can I say? I was told that about Big O and love the second half, so it remains a coin flip when I hear that kind of warning. That's perfectly fair. That's perfectly fair. I would say that the first half of Guilty Crown is a lot more sparkly, if you know what I mean. You'll know exactly what I mean. It's a little bit more sparkly and inspirational than that second half. But yeah, the unfortunately the anime is not as good as the opening. I gotta make a whole list of anime that aren't as good as their opening theme. Because when the anime opens and you pop off and you're like, hey, hey, and you get to the anime and you're like actually kind of bored now, you're like, ah, that sucks. That's so unfortunate. Like the series will not match the hype of the opening. While we're on that, what other shared experiences do we have with the chat? So at least somebody knew about Shakugan no Shana. That series was kind of interesting, although the main character was kind of annoying. I always liked the concept, and it's one of the few anime where I actually watch the OVAs. I usually don't do that. I watched the OVAs because it was pretty interesting. I unfortunately never finished the third season. What else do I think is obscure people know about? Hold on. Part 4 of JoJo's was freaking trolls you. Effing trolls you. Kills off a bunch of characters and doesn't change the opening until 2 episodes later just to rub the side. Oh, that's so devious. That's vicious, man. Let's see. What else we got in here? Hold on a second. Man, if y'all were in here last chat with Looney Razor, I remember he likes this one a whole lot. This is a comedy. Comedy's kind of weird in anime because sometimes they're funny and sometimes they're just not. Sometimes they'll get a little smirk out of you and that's it. And then other times the problem is that it gets lost in translation. And I don't know what to do about that, but yeah, this one's relatively interesting. He likes it a whole bunch. To make a long story short, dude gets into a relationship with a mermaid by accident. It's kind of crazy because they're like a gang. I can't remember. It's been so long. It's been so long. I don't typically recommend. I don't typically recommend comedy anime. I'm only recommending this one because he likes it a lot. kind of like British dry humor, not translating culturally despite being the same language, allegedly. That's actually, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, my tongue. You're right about that. Yeah. Just a second. Naruto almost fits that description of an anime that has openings better than the actual anime. I've watched one episode of My Bride is a Mermaid and had to give it up. Comedy anime are hit or miss. You are absolutely correct. You are absolutely correct. There was one funny one I can't. Nah, dude, hold on. Okay. I'm gonna feel so bad if y'all don't like this one, but it's okay. It's okay. Y'all ever watch Y'all ever watch Disastrous Life of Psyche K? Most people I know don't know about this anime or don't care about it because when you explain it, the synopsis almost sounds at face value exactly the same as Mob Psycho. And so people look at you funny when you explain it. But this anime is legitimately funny. Even in the dub, it's actually straight up funny because the characters are so stupid. I like his design too, because he got the little antennas. I mean, you can tell it's pretty low budget, but it's not a big deal. I like it still. Disastrous Life of Psyche K is literally the best comedy anime I've ever watched. Literally perfect. Bro. This man is fun. This man is funny because he just do not be having it. Oh my goodness, the characters, man. His parents are so goofy too. I remember. Yeah, this is one of those. This is one of those. This is one of those comedy I would genuinely like with my whole chest recommend. Yeah, it's pretty. It's pretty good. It's pretty good. Wow. Beyond that, though, there are some that I've watched. I don't know if I've ever cared all that much about them. Some of them just ended up being requests that I just so happened to have watched and remembered. Like, what is it? What is that anime called? Yeah, I don't be watching. I don't be watching them comedies like that. A lot of them are such shoulder shrugs. Like for example, Defrag. It's been a long time since I watched Defrag. It's okay, I guess. I don't remember. I don't remember laughing. Hayate the Combat Butler or something like that was okay at the start. It's super generic though. I saw Akame got killed during its hype phase, and I was like, really? That was the hype? Akame got killed. Hold on a sec. Yeah, you're right. You're right. Akame got killed is a thing that happened. An anime to ever exist. Everybody recognizes this anime, but no one can actually point out to me why it deserves to be popular. I've not found one legitimate argument. People will say stuff like S Def is hot. I'm like, but did I ask though? I'm like, did I ask though? Explain to me why I should care. I watched the whole thing. Ending had me pissed off. Apparently it's a different one from the one that exists in the manga, which is super interesting to me. Everyone gets packed up. Yeah, that about sums it up. Akame got killed is super normal. I wish they had gone more in depth with the world and whatnot. I wish they did as well. That sounds very interesting. Yeah. I wish we got to see more of those. I forget what they're called, the sacred arms or whatever they call them, the treasure tools, the royal. I can't remember. I'm sorry. The special weapons that they use. Some of them were pretty cool. I like that. I thought it was pretty funny that there were two of the same one, right? Yeah, there was like I remember there's two of it. There was like the prototype version of Incursio, and then there was the actual version. I thought that was very interesting. I wonder how many duplicates or prototype versions of those different weapons that they had. The ending of that Dino Mech anime is way different in the manga, but it's big, big, small. The one with zero, the Dino Chick people had the poster girl of anime for a time. My tongue. What is another anime that I don't think everyone has watched? I don't think this one is that big of a deal either. Y'all ever watch Kaze no Stigma? Not my thing, honestly, for obvious reasons. I was just wondering if anybody had watched it. I don't think I've ever met very many people who've watched this one. This is a very unemployed watch. I watched it because I had nothing else to do. Every anime is mid. This is a very anti-tuber take. I'm going to leave that alone. Kaze no Stigma has a lot of stigma. Had to drop it. Yeah, you right, man. You right. I thought the idea was interesting, right? The base idea, right? They were like, surprise, surprise, this guy likes his cousin. And I was like, hey, yo, what? I was like, huh? And I don't necessarily enjoy many of the characters, actual characters all that much. I don't really care for most of them. I guess the dude's little brother is okay, but he's like a typical anime brother, well, not exactly typical, but he's close enough. While we're all here, y'all ever watch Nararion? That was okay. I liked season 1. Season 1 was all right. Season 2 was pretty boring though. If y'all don't know, if y'all ever known if y'all have ever heard of the yokai known as Nararion, this story effectively follows that guy's grandson. So he's kind of Nararion. He's like 1/4 yokai. He's mostly human. It's kind of a weird thing. It's okay. It's okay. No, but I've been thinking about it. It might be a little cool. Maybe a little bit. Oh, I saw most of it on Netflix, but I just left off on a recap and never saw the rest. Law. Yeah, man, I be skipping them recap episodes. Y'all want to know something crazy? All right, so when I was watching Death Note for the first time, because I watched it multiple times, I got to episode 26, right? L died. I was like, okay. Episode 27. Episode 27 was a recap. And I said, you know what? I think this is the appropriate time to stop watching. To me, the story is over. And to this very day, I did not watch the rest of Death Note. To me, there are only 26 episodes and a recap. Didn't have a choice. It said finale. Am I the only person? Am I not the only person who sometimes I'll be watching an anime and I'll stop at the last episode and don't watch it? I haven't seen it all, but know an opinion would claim you choose correctly. But I know an opinion would claim you choose correctly. There are literally hundreds of anime I kind of like, and I kind of like any of them. My bad. And I kind of like any genre. I have to be strict in order to not waste time on complete misses. Also, World Trigger. That reminds me. Yes. Oh yeah, you were the one who recommended that, weren't you? Yes. But yeah, what was I about to say? What other random obscure anime? Yeah, man, there are so many one season wonders. Black Bullet, bro. Oh no. Oh no. He unlocked a repressed memory. Bro, I'm trying to figure out how Black Bullet got so popular. Black Bullet is so popular that another anime that I watched after it directly referenced it, called Durarara. Dororo and one of that character. What is that girl's name with the hat? If you've ever watched Dororo, Dororo is pretty nice. You should give it a try if you haven't. One of the characters actually brings up Black Bullet in like a random scene, but it's weird. I've heard this anime described as it got so shafted by Netflix. Yeah. If I get that far, I gotta finish. Or at least just watch the ending. Yeah. What was I about to say? I have heard Black Bullet described as a main character collecting lollies like Pokemon. I think that's all I should say. I don't want the FBI knocking on my door. They had the third series, but only the third season of the third series. So I watched season 1, 2, and 5. Oh yeah, okay, all right. That's a non-high seas issue. That makes sense. Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah, I really hate how they screw a lot of shows over with the availability. Like you'll watch one season, they'll be like, "Wow, that was good. Let's watch season 2." They say, "Nope, you can't have season 2. You got to go straight to season 3. Season 2 doesn't exist on Netflix." And I'm like, "Ah, dang it." But yeah. But yeah, I don't want to talk too much about Black Bullet, but it was yeah, Black Bullet was something else, man. It was what do I say about Black Bullet? Do I have any compliments for Black Bullet? Black Bullet is a one season wonder of anime of all time to ever exist. All right, Ninja. It was fun seeing you. I'll talk to you later, man. Durura, the writer, wrote most of the Bleach light novels. The writer wrote most of the Bleach light novels. They rock Imp. MIO. Night Turbo. Which reminds me, what time is it? I got some time. Do I want to play the game after this? I don't know. But yeah, Dororo is pretty good. I would recommend it. It is by no means like the extra most bestest thing ever, but I like that it takes its world seriously and they have all these different interactions with the characters. Um, yeah, you live in Germany, don't you? I'm surprised you made it this far. I didn't think you were gonna. I didn't think you were gonna be here this long. Which reminds me, when did I start? It's been 3 hours. Wow. Question, because I'll probably wrap up soon. Wait, no, the viewer count just went up. I can't drop off now. Oh well. Question for all 5 people who are here. I don't plan on continuing to stream on Fridays. What days and times do you suggest would be better? Mind you, I am in Central Time. So what time do you think in Central Time would be better to do this, and on what days? But anyway, yeah, I like Dororo a fair deal. It's pretty interesting. I do note that some of the original trio of main characters are my least favorite characters in the series, but beyond that, I don't have any real complaints. It's not Steins Gate though, so what can I say? What a random ass anime. Wednesday or Thursday, as we have to relax a bit from work midweek. That's true. That's true. Yeah. I figured a lot of people in my age demographic would probably be at work today. That's what I was concerned about. So I didn't know if it was a good idea to do this today. I figured I'd give it a try anyway for the sake of striking the iron, but you know how it is. Oh, yeah. That reminds me. I don't know what times. As far as writing goes, I tend to enjoy character driven narratives or movies about 2 people at a table for 2 hours more than heavy intrigue action. That's fair, that's fair. Have y'all ever watched Blood, I spelled it wrong. Blood Blockade Battlefront. This one's pretty. This one's pretty cool. It's not the most funny anime, but I think it's pretty interesting. Although season one is definitely better than season two. For those of you who don't know, this is about a guy who moved to New York City, but the problem was there's a rift under the city, but to another dimension. It's like an alien world or hell or something like that, and it was trying to overwrite that this world with that one, kind of like Gravity Falls style. But they ended up putting a barrier that locked all the crazy stuff inside of New York City. It became known as Hell Salem's Lot. And so this guy kind of just, he's a mostly normal dude who lives there. And as you can see, he has his magical eyes or whatever. Because in any significant event in history, the gods or whatever, they'll force somebody to give up their eyes and replace them with these. They have powers or whatever, but their main purpose is to record events so the gods can see them. And so it's an interest. So he's like a 99% normal person in like a ridiculous alien world. Bro has the Gios. It's funny too, because he's like super underpowered. Like somebody in season two has the weaker version of this eye, like the previous version, because it's made clear that every successive generation, the eyes get better. They have more features. He has the newest one, right? But the guy who has the previous one, he's somehow able to use his eyes way better than he is. Like, I'm like, dude, why you gonna let this man show you up like that? But I like Blood Battlefront Blockade. If I'm watching anime, I kind of feel like full use of the medium involves action not easily depicted in live action, but most honestly fluid on that opinion. I do feel that though. I agree with that. Now, having said that, y'all ever watch Parasite? I know y'all had to have seen Parasite by now. It's been like 10 something years. Tell me y'all done seen Parasite. I love Parasite. Parasite is great. Parasite is great. Parasite is lit, man. Parasite is lit. Tokyo Ghoul is emo Parasite. You gonna body that man like that? That's crazy. You gonna cook that man like that? That's so mean. I can't believe you've done this. I watched one episode, man. It's one of those things I think about watching but never do. I understand. That's perfectly fair. That's perfectly fair. Man, the that soundtrack though, the opening theme is lit. If you've ever listened to the full opening, like outside of the anime, like the full length one, it's crazy because it'll like switch up into an entirely different, like a different track, different theme, and everything. It's cool. But what was I about to say? I didn't think I'd like Parasite because it's closer to like the horror thing. I mentioned earlier I'm not super fond of horror, but I like this. I like this a great deal. I like this a great deal. Man, it's cool. The track, the track where they come in with that like that choir or whatever it's called in the middle during the fight scenes. They be man, they be spitting. It be lit. It be lit. The heck? Ugh. Is the Does the manga go past the anime? I never thought to read it. Or light novel. I forgot they had. Hey, tell you what. Why do these things give off spaghetti monster vibes? Horror influence is something I want to study. Bleach utilizes it occasionally, but mostly isolated. That's uglier than I remembered. Let me get away from that. Like, just look at this thing's eyes, right? Look at this thing's eyes and tell me, and tell me, go back, that these parasites don't these parasites don't have spaghetti monster vibes. Look at this shit, man. Wasn't Parasite airing around the same time when they're talking about you know what? I'm not exactly sure. I never checked it out, but yeah. They have spaghetti monster eyes. When you see it, you can't unsee it. It's so crazy. All right. Horror is a quite favorite of mine. Very little good horror though. This is true. This is true. I think the horror genre, like the comedy genre, could be a lot better. While we're here though, what I am so glad I'm able to talk about anime this long without somebody bringing up High School DxD. But I'm gonna leave that right there. Another was an anime I watched for sure. That reminds me, I've been meaning to watch another for years. I watched the first two episodes and forgot about it in like 2019. I've been meaning to get back to it. I will one day for sure. Let me just throw out a random one. Hold on a second. AOT. I haven't watched Gintama yet. One Piece fan letter. Fruits Basket. I meant to watch this. I never got around to it. Clanad After Story. I didn't finish Clanad yet. I meant to. I just hadn't got around to it. Code Geass. I'm not gonna lie, man. Code Geass was lit. I was very close to finally forgetting High School DxD existed. I am not grateful you reminded me. Well, I'll tell you the good news. I don't want to talk about it either. I just think that if I gotta remember it, other people gotta remember too. That's one of the core reasons I'm not an AniTuber. They'll be like, Isaiah, talk about this weird suspect thing, and I'm like, I don't want to do that. Code Geass is awesome. I don't understand how some dudes trash on it beyond they can't follow it. Same happened with AOT. Yeah, I agree with that. There's a part during the second season where people like to say that it fell off or got complicated. I don't think that way. I don't think so. Like, people will say crazy stuff like, oh, Lei Luce tried to use his Geass on God. It's like, that's not what happened. Like, y'all don't, like, how about y'all actually look at the story and see what happened? He literally says in the story, his dad says, are you trying to use your Geass on God? And he literally says, no, I want to ask God a question. And then he got his answer, and that was that. It's like, people try to make it seem worse than it actually is. Clanad and Fruits Basket are peak slice of life. I have to keep that in mind. Wow. How many episodes did I get into Clanad? Maybe 7? 6? I don't remember. And Fruits Basket, yeah, I'll have to get to that. If I have the time, I'll probably watch that tomorrow or something. Monster, yet another anime that people keep recommending and name dropping, but I never knew anything about. Drama, mystery, suspense. All right. All right. What was I about to say? Johan? What do you mean? Oh, is that an anime? I'm not familiar with that one. I see that dude brought up in the same breath as my goat constantly. How did y'all feel about Violet Evergarden? I feel like people said Violet Evergarden was a lot worse than it was hyped up to be. Jonan is the villain of Monster, apparently an all-time manipulator. Doubt, in parentheses. Oh man, it made me cry for 3 hours, and I'll watch it again. Yeah, I like Violet Evergarden. That reminds me, I didn't watch the last episode. Yeah, I gotta stop doing that. I gotta stop doing that. In any case, though, what was I about to say? Isaiah, what were you about to say? I like Violet Evergarden. It's pretty interesting. I understand if it's not everybody's cup of tea, though. Monster is okay. Very complex story. Almost too complex. Violet Evergarden was nice. Indeed, it was nice. That ending theme was hard as hell. I'm not gonna lie. I will watch Vinland Saga one day. I will, probably. I think I watch it. I don't know. It's more excusable with Violet since it's more about the journey than the destination. That's fair. That's perfectly. I actually agree with you on that a great deal. Of course, going back to earlier, that is also a solid example of the concept of a beyond journey's end. I guess that's a very good example of how it totally actually work, right? Just because I like to see the journey first doesn't mean you have to make the story work. That's just my preference is all. But you're absolutely correct. Hajime no Ippo? Don't beat me up. I've never watched it. I've never watched it. Mob Psycho? Don't beat me up. I've never watched it. I meant to. I meant to in high school. I forgot about it. Ghibli films? Yep. Monogatari? I meant to watch it. I meant to watch it. I never got around to it. Cowboy Bebop? Yeah, we watched that. We watched all of that. Almost all of it. I don't think I watched the last couple of episodes, though. Kaguya-sama, I watched the first couple of episodes, and I gave up on it because I just didn't like it. The dubbing was great, I guess. Mr. Krabs just wasn't feeling it. Whoa! Jiminy Crickets! Dot, dot, dot. It's already suspenseful. I never watched a Ghibli movie, and I don't think I ever will. Oh, fuck. I can't believe you've done this. I can forgive Hajime, but Mob Psycho 100 is more questionable. Katanagatari to me is better than Monogatari, same author. I probably will watch them all eventually. I am capable of watching things that are not dubbed, right? I'm just a lot less likely to do so. And that's how that happened. I was gonna watch it one day and I realized they didn't have a dub. And I was like, Isaiah, you're eating. You're not about to watch this right now because you're gonna look at your food, right? You're gonna look up and you're not gonna know what's going on. That's just me personally, though. One Piece, let's not do that today. But yeah, you get the idea. I'm not a very big fan of sports anime. Isaiah, what were you about to say? This is the part where I do have to remind the chat I am not an AniTuber. I don't know. I don't even remember exactly how we got on anime list. What was I even doing? But yeah. Same for the Ghibli. Though I honestly might watch one later. Split attention, I get it. I think the sub is objectively better for concerned sins, but only if you know the history of the voice actor for the villain specifically. Otherwise, dub is equally good. I'll keep that in mind. That's good. That's good. Oh my goodness, that's impressive. That is impressive. I tell you what I'm gonna do for that data video. I'm gonna try my absolute best to speed run that video. I'm gonna use so many manga panels panning up and down and left to right. Actually, no. I tell myself that all the time, right? But I keep telling myself, Isaiah, you're gonna phone in this editing to get this video out as quickly as possible. And then I'll turn around and not do it. But yeah. What are y'all opinions on Don Machi? Because that's one of those anime that people usually bring up in conversations about anime, right? So, well, seeing as we're having a conversation about anime, I guess somebody was going to bring it up eventually. What are our opinions on this? Now, I will note that I watched 4 seasons of it. No one made me do it, right? I kind of like season 3 and 4 a lot. Season 1 was okay. It had a lot of potential. That's why I kept watching. Interesting concept. Animation also isn't that bad at all. Never heard of it? That's actually surprising. It's surprising. It's all right though. It ain't like it's the best anime ever or something. Um, well, it was one of those power fantasies that Ninja was talking about earlier. You could give it a try. It's all right. Later seasons I think are better. I tend to skip the scenes where the main character isn't around because most of the characters on their own aren't interesting enough. You know, this is gonna sound crazy. Some of these characters, even in season 4, I like season 4 a lot. I think it's my favorite season. But I kept skipping some of the scenes with the other characters because they were so inconsequential. I just didn't care. Oh yeah, I have. I haven't heard the Japan name though. Okay, that makes sense. That makes sense. Yeah. One of these days, I'm gonna put together an actual like an anime watch list, like for beginners or something like that. I feel like a lot of people's beginner anime watch lists are very lopsided. Bobobo thoughts. It's been so. It's been like 19 years since I watched Bobobo. But I did like it at the time when I was a kid. I just can't remember anything about it. I know the dude had the fro, he had the blonde hair and all that. Not so terrible, but far from great. I remember it being very goofy. Wait, hold on a second. I'm mixing comments. My bad. Danmachi is an anime. I watched some of it. It's like a 4 to me. Not terrible, but far from great. In my opinion, a 4 out of 10 is indeed terrible, unless you're talking about 4 out of 5. Okay, but yeah, that's perfectly fair. Not everybody's cup of tea. I don't think it's even my cup of tea necessarily. I only like some of the part. I like some of the parts with the fights, but I don't necessarily care about the characters. Like I don't care about this chick that much. I don't necessarily like this chick either, right? Side character. I don't really care about them. I'd be ready for them to kill the monsters. That's the part where I'd be interested. I shotgunned it last summer, and it was amazing and hilarious, but it is a lot. It's a lot. That's fair. That's perfectly fair. Yeah. Man, I got a confession to make. I never finished Seven Deadly Sins. I never finished it. That season, everybody was complaining about the animation. I literally never even touched it. I don't even know if I like this series, honestly. It's got some qualities, but the writing itself is kind of flimsy. Not that great a transgression. Yeah, especially with them 7 deadly frames in season 3 or whatever it was, man. I said, you know what? I don't like this series that much. I found it very funny that this series could blatantly retcon stuff out of nowhere and no one would complain about it. It was always the funniest thing to me. I think I know more people who haven't finished Seven Deadly Sins than those who have. Characters carry the story, everything else is worthless. You are absolutely correct. I'm not gonna hold you, bro. Ah, you are absolutely correct. Yeah, that sounds about right. Matter of fact, after this discussion, I'm gonna completely forget it exists. Anytime people bring it up to me, my eyes kind of glaze over. I know people like what's his face a lot. The buff guy, I can't remember his name. Escanor. People like Escanor, but that's it. I don't know if I care about most of the characters. Bon is Bon. He has indeed incriminated himself, and I do not suppose that he will recover. Um, you see, big girl. um, I kind of like him. He's cool. Meliodas is all right too. I like the concept of whatever this guy's name is with the pink hair. I don't care about what's her face that much at all. Escanon, Bond, Godet, Gother. Yeah, I very much like the concept of Gother. It's interesting. He's a very interesting creature. Bond got into that. He got into that Loki trap. So did a giant girl. By no one talks about that. Yeah, but no one talks about that. Yeah. Merlin is indeed a nothing burger. Don't even get me started, man. Don't even get me started. Yeah. I like how their weapons work though, because they talked about it in season 1, and you didn't get a chance to see it for a while. They were talking about how their weapons let them draw full power. I thought it just like boosted their power or something, like their power output. No, it literally, like for example, Meliodas' weapon, he has full counter, right? Full counter does not scale. So him making clones of himself that have full counter make him way more powerful. I was like, that actually makes a lot of sense. I actually like that aspect of it. It was pretty cool. Her conning both the Demon King and the Goddess is hilarious, and being an Eldritch Star Spawn is great. That's all she got. That is indeed all she has, it seems. Uh, well, it's getting pretty late, guys. I might have to call it quits here. Any closing comments before I shut this bad boy down? Probably go watch TV after this or something. Finish watching Parasite. Wait, no, hold up. There's one more anime I want to talk about. Have y'all ever watched this one? This one is actually pretty good. A Lull in the Sea. It's good. No fighting whatsoever. It's just straight up people and fucking drama. It's good. I like this one. To the degree that I like fight scenes, you think it's weird. It's weird. I like fight scenes so much, right? And combat-based stuff. But this was actually pretty good. Matter of fact, I'm going to go watch this as soon as I get off. I'm going to go rewatch this for the third time. This anime is actually pretty good. If you've never seen it. It's about... So apparently there's like a race of people that live under the sea. And then there are the people on the land. And there's a bunch of conflicts of interest surrounding that. But there's that, right? How that affects the cultures as a whole. And then there's a bunch of personal drama. Probably the same. Watch something good. Finish reading the Bible for the night. Lots of people have said Nagi is good. Might have to give it a try. This is probably one of my favorite anime. I'm not sure about exactly that ending yet. I do like both parts of the anime. I do like this a great deal. I would recommend it because it's my thing. Free my man double O A. He ain't do nothing. Who is that? BK01. Hold on. You defended some headphones? Oh, you talking about a robot. Oh. Huh? Bro, is that Optimus Prime? What is this? I'm not gonna lie, I do not understand what's going on right now. Interesting. Oh. Is this it? No? I don't know. Oh well. Goon robot that dies in the 73. Okay. He was humanity's friend. Bet. Alright. Well, in any case, that's all I've got for today. Until next time, if you need me, you know where to find me. This is Isaiah from Magic System Monday, and I'll see you